Chapter 1. Boom. Feeling the continuous explosion sound coming from outside, and by the way, he turned his head and looked at the several indescribable mosaics beside him. Li Qingyun felt a burst of brain pain. Who can tell him why it was a bomb that woke him up instead of firecrackers? He was still having a headache how to face the 7 ants and 8 ants who urged him to marry him. Now he is finally relieved. As a middle-aged and elderly man who is close to the age of 40 and has not been married, every Chinese New Year family gathering is simply a meeting. Criticism. Yesterday he was still worried about how to face today's family criticism meeting. But now it's fine. There is no need to worry at all. What he needs to worry about now is how to survive. It's too trivial to go straight across after sleeping at home. For others, it may be hesitation for a long time when they encounter this kind of thing. But for Li Qingyun, who was a street novelist in his previous life, is it not a normal basic operation to go through this kind of thing? Yes, before he crossed the road, he was a dead man who wrote novels. Because the 3 views of writing rubbish were not correct, the lack of innovation and the lack of brainlessness led to no readers at all. If he hadn't been working part-time as a security guard, he might even have a problem with survival. Difficult to solve. Just now, Li Qingyun looked around for a moment and felt that this one was about to kneel. He is now in the living room on the 2nd floor. Just now, the body's predecessor was preparing dinner with his parents. As a result, a missile flew from nowhere, and it fell directly from the ceiling, and then there was a loud explosion. Opened. It is reasonable to say that if he is confused by a missile at close range, unless he has a Superman-like physique, he is definitely hanged. But it is clear that crossing the gods does not teach the basic law at all. Even though the parents of this body and the 2 hapless men brought down by the missiles have all become indescribable mosaics, his body is still unharmed. Not even a piece of oily skin is broken. Definitely, it's not completely unharmed. After all, isn't this soul being replaced? He patted his cheek and got his own memory from the remaining soul fragments. The unlucky child who was crossed by himself is called Jack Ma. He is 18 years old this year and is a Chinese born in Sokovia, a small country in Eastern Europe. Depend on. Knowing his situation from the memory fragments, Li Qingyun couldn't help but cursed. Jack Ma's parents were native flower growers, but 3 months before he was born, his parents sold 5 sets of courtyard houses inherited from the imperial capital's ancestors and came to Sokovia to seek a living. Alright, this story really made everyone laugh to tears, but considering the social environment at that time, this kind of suffocating operation did happen a lot. Fortunately, Jack Ma's parents did a suffocating thing, but the 2 of them are quite diligent. They have been working hard in Sokovia for more than 10 years, and relying on the love of the flowers and their children for real estate. They finally settled in Sokovia. Qvia owns a building. That's right, you read that right. Passing through a building, Jack Ma is also a 2nd-generation building in Sokovia. Only now, listening to the sound of bombing coming from my ears, it is estimated that the 2nd generation of his building should be over. He shook his head and put his dream of the 2nd generation behind him. What he now needs to consider is how he can survive. The sound of gunfire and bombing outside was chaotic. Although I don't know what happened, I think with my toes to know that something is definitely going on. Even missiles can fly into their living room, and one can imagine what the chaos should look like outside. Just staying in place is definitely not a good idea, because there is still a missile inserted above the head. This 6-story apartment building was the property of his predecessor parents. The restaurant was opened on the 1st floor, his family lived on the 2nd floor, and all the buildings above the 3rd floor were rented out. The missile just now seemed to fly in from the 3rd floor window, directly pierced through the 3rd floor and the 2nd floor ceiling, and then exploded in his living room. And now the missile inserted above the head is about 1 meter long, and it is inserted diagonally into the floor of the 3rd floor, leaning at a strange angle. The missile may be detonated at any time. Even if it does not detonate, if it falls from the 3rd floor, it will probably explode with a bang. So his top priority now is to quickly escape from this dangerous building and find a safe place to hide. Although it is not safe outside now, it is at least much stronger than a missile on your head. Only when he was about to run away, he suddenly discovered that the missile had the Stark logo printed on it. Stark Group? Li Qingyun's brain buzzed. He had no idea when he learned that his country was Sokovia. I dare not say that I can write down the names of all countries, but Sokovia plus the Stark Group, if he can't remember anymore, he is really ashamed of his reputation as a writer. Actually, came across to Marvel in a daze? What's even more annoying is that people who cross Marvel start directly in New York, and the village head of the new village is not Phil. Phil Coulson is Little Spider-Man, or it is Iron Man or Gene Bin. But what about yourself? The start was a head-on launch of a missile developed by the Stark Group? This gap is too big, right? And if I remember correctly, the parents of this body seem to have been sent directly to the sky by a missile developed by the Stark Group. Strictly speaking, isn't it that Iron Man is his own murderer of his father and mother? Woo-woo. Just as he was wandering beyond the sky, he heard bursts of crying in the gap of the explosion. There are still living people? Li Qingyuan looked up, because he couldn't see the scene on the third floor because his vision was blocked, but it was clear that the cry came from the third floor. But he didn't have any plans to save people now. God knew when the missile would explode, so he had better run away as soon as possible. After finally passing through it once, he doesn't want to do it again just because he is a good person. This is the Marvel world, where boss runs all over the place where aliens go crazy. He has little arms and legs, but he can't afford to be a hero. Besides, it is too difficult for him to be a hero based on his character. The door has been destroyed by the aftermath of the explosion, but fortunately, it's only the second floor. If you jump down and die, you will get a foot. It's not a big problem. It was just that he had just started to walk to the window, and his footsteps turned back in a wicked manner. Seemingly? In my memory, the last name of the couple who rented their house upstairs is a bit weird. What is it called? Maximoff. Chapter 2. Wanda. Maximoff. Li Qingyuan obtained the name of the youngest daughter of the family upstairs from the remaining memory fragments. The couple upstairs has a twin daughter. The youngest daughter is Wanda. What is the name of the twin son? Sorry, he forgot. Glancing at the calendar hanging on the wall, 2006. Combined with the memory in my mind, the one crying upstairs should be Scarlet Witch in the state of Little Lowly. No way, it's not a good time to be a writer in the street these years. He didn't know how many movies he watched back and forth to write about Marvel. It can be said that Wanda's life experience is back and forth. He definitely does not admit that it was because of the greatness of blush that he carefully observed it. Marvel was founded in 1939. Except for Mr. Stan Lee, who has always existed as a hidden boss, everyone from the chairman to the cleaner has changed for several generations. Because of shifting gears, Marvel's worldview of the universe has actually been overthrown and updated how many times? After all, there are 100,000 ways to write in 10,000 writers. The worldview designed by the previous one will definitely not be fully accepted by the next one. Anyway, the Marvel Universe is set to eat books. Scarlet Witch, that is, Wanda. Maximoff's personal settings have also been changed several times. With the addition of messy copyright issues, it can be said that even if Mr. Stanley comes in person, he can't be sure what version he has gone through. But if it is the place name of Sokovia plus Wanda, who is just 10 years old this year, then basically it can be determined that what I am now and should be the Marvel movie universe. Thinking of this, Li Qingyuan slightly slowed down. Although Marvel movie universe is also in crisis, it is much safer than those unreasonable comic universes. At the very least, there will be no guys who break through the fourth wall in this world. Is it Wanda? Thinking of this, he immediately called out to the big hole in the roof. No way, the gunshots rang out again. If you don't shout loudly, you won't be able to hear it at all. Woo-woo. Obviously, the little lowly, who was in a mental breakdown, did not hear his roar shout at all, but continued to cry with his head in his arms. Brother Jack, are you still alive? Although Wanda didn't reply, the other kid did. Damn, what does it mean that I'm not dead yet? This kid really can't speak. Li Qingyuan felt a crow flying over his forehead. No wonder this guy was written to death after only one appearance. With this broken mouth, it is considered the screenwriter's face to live for 3 minutes. Pietro Maximoff, Wanda's twin brother, is also a late Quicksilver. The ability of Quicksilver is super high-speed movement, and the speed is said to be on par with that of a kid in the red clothes next door. Originally, this guy should also be considered a general of the Women's Federation, but it seemed that because the guy's special effects were too expensive, he was written to death. Tell a joke, Quicksilver, which was faster than the speed of light, was killed by a machine gun. Well, anyway, due to funding issues, even Ancient One can fall downstairs to death. Quicksilver being killed by a machine gun is not a joke. The Maximoff family has been renting in this building for several years, so the twins and Li Qingyuan's predecessor are also considered acquaintances. Definitely, the kind of acquaintance who is just a nodding acquaintance. After all, the age difference between the two sides is 7 or 8 years. The previous Jack Marco was not interested in playing with 2 little kids. Brother Jack, how are my parents? Pietro asked loudly from above, without waiting for him to reply. Pietro had already put an end to his parents when he saw his parents being bombed directly downstairs by a missile, but now he heard voices from upstairs, which made his young mind suddenly full of hope. Since the landlord's stupid son is fine, Maybe my parents are fine too. Your parents are in a very bad state. Li Qingyuan looked at the pile of mosaics speechlessly. It is estimated that even if Wolverine becomes this look, I am afraid it will be troublesome to resurrect. Woo-woo. Well, Pietro, who was still bracing himself in front of his sister, also started to cry. Li Qingyuan walked under the hole, took a look at the height of the room, and considered how he could climb up. He didn't have any thoughts about Wanda's future crimson. After all, he was only a 10-year-old child, and he didn't dare to risk being rubbed by the river crab. The reason why I went to find Wanda brothers and sisters was mainly because according to the plot in the movie, it seemed that the location of the two children could survive the war safely. There was a turmoil outside now. He didn't dare to rush out to find death. Although there was indeed a missile lying on the 3rd floor, he knew the plot, but he knew that the missile was a dumb gun. Moving the chair out of the corner of the room and putting it on the rubble, Li Qingyuan reached for the floor of the 3rd floor. Thanks to the predecessor who has always exercised, plus the 18-year-old young posture, if he had the physical fitness before crossing, even if he wanted to reach the floor, he would not be able to climb up. It took all my energy to climb to the 3rd floor and saw the twins hiding under the table along with the sound of crying. By the way, what's the use for you two to hide under the table? Could it be that you two think that Shockwave can withstand missiles with a wooden table? This is not an anti-Japanese drama. Brother Jack, Pietro shouted at him with red eyes. Although the three of them didn't know each other very well before, they could be considered acquaintances anyway. The 10-year-old child suddenly lost his parents and had to dress up as a man in front of his sister. Now it's hard to meet an acquaintance. Pietro couldn't help it. After all, he was just a 10-year-old kid no matter what. It's okay. Don't be afraid. Now you two come out first. Moving away the broken bricks blocking the table, Li Qingyuan tried his best to show an amiable smile. He reached out to hold the twins' wrists and dragged them directly out from under the table. You. Wanda was still squatting on the ground and sobbing non-stop. Although Pietro said it was better, he still seemed a little bit arrogant. You can't expect a 10-year-old child to be calm in this situation right now. Besides, if these two guys are really so calm, then Li Qingyuan will have to wonder if they are the same as himself, and they have also crossed over. The host comes into contact with the world node character Wanda. Maximov opens the teleportation qualification, and the first teleportation will begin in 10 minutes. Just as he was considering how to comfort the two children not to cry, a mechanical sound suddenly came to mind in his mind. Well, my gold finger finally arrived. Chapter 3. If you don't bring a gold finger, you would be embarrassed to go out and beck and roar. Not to mention the dangerous world of the Marvel Universe. If the protagonist does not bring gold finger, he is basically here to deliver food. Whoever wants to come here to send himself over will definitely not be idle and want to watch 10,000 tricks of his own death. System, what is the first world? What is my mission? It only took 3 seconds for Li Qingyuan to accept the setting of his own system. After all, he could accept things like crossing Marvel immediately. Isn't it a matter of course that the delivery of a system is definitely? The countdown begins. The first world is Godzilla 2, King of Monsters. The mission will be released after the host's journey through, and the host has 9 minutes and 40 seconds to prepare. The cold mechanical sound of the system immediately replied, and it was obvious that this was a system of unreasonable emotions. Depend on. Even if he could directly communicate with the system in his mind, Li Qingyuan couldn't help but curse directly. You said that if it is the old version of Godzilla, the latest version of Godzilla 2, King of Monsters? Monsters walk all over the floor, grow mushrooms all over the world. Let alone a mission with your own small body, you can't stand nuclear radiation. This Nemo won't be the mentally handicapped system to tease oneself. Wanda and Pietro, who were crying, stopped sobbing immediately. Both children raised their heads and looked at Li Qingyuan, who was swearing suddenly, with 3 point fear and 2 points of doubt in their eyes. It's nothing. I'm a little bored. Seeing his actions terrified the two children, Li Qingyuan had to show a wry smile, and then reached out and rubbed their heads. System, can I change the task? I'm a newcomer. Is it too exaggerated to directly transmit this plot? Although knowing that his request is useless at all, Li Qingyuan feels that he should fight for it a little bit. Maybe this mentally handicapped system suddenly collapsed. Analyzing the host's ability. According to the detection that the host's attributes are slightly lower than ordinary people, the survival probability of transmitting Godzilla 2, King of Monsters is 0.000001 per thousand, and the story world has been changed. Now it is changed to Titan Nick. Yeah. Excited. Li Qingyuan immediately hugged the little Wanda in his arms, and then came a 3-game high. Wanda looked at the suddenly crazy big brother with dumb eyes, a little bit unable to understand his actions. Pietro pulled his sister away quickly and looked at the dancing guy with a little caution. Isn't this guy stupid? Titan Nick? Li Qingyuan looked at the first story world that appeared virtually before his eyes and felt that his wave was stable. The Titan Nick is a love movie adapted by James Cameron based on real historical events. It swept the entire film and television circle as soon as it was released and won the awards. There is no danger in the whole movie from beginning to end, and there are some minor troubles when the ship sinks at the end. But for him who is familiar with the plot of the whole movie, can that little trouble be considered a trouble? If you want to cross the Titan Nick, the task should be to save people or get the heart of the ocean, or to be a little bit evil, but also to trick the heroine Ruth. In other words, although Kate Lewinster later got the nickname of Fat One because of her release, but when she was filming Titan Nick, she was still flourishing. If she really had a mission, then she didn't. It's a disadvantage. You two wait here first. I will go to the toilet and come back. Seeing that there are 7 minutes remaining in the countdown, Li Qingyuan immediately asked the brother and sister in front of him. Without waiting for the two brothers and sisters to react, he immediately crawled down the hole. It's easy to get up and down. The total drop is less than 3 meters high, so there is no problem even if you just jump straight down. Seeing Li Qingyuan who suddenly disappeared in front of him, Pietro and Wanda had forgotten their fear and crying, and the two children looked at each other suddenly. Pietro, is Brother Jack stupid? After a long pause, Wanda asked his brother in a low voice. Probably. He might have hit his head. Pietro scratched his forehead and said uncertainly, even if you really want to go to the bathroom on the 3rd floor is not broken. As for jumping back to the 2nd floor, without thinking about the complaints of the two little guys, Li Qingyuan immediately rushed into the bedroom and began to pick things up. Although Titan Nick is a very simple task for newcomers, at any rate this is also the first time I have traveled through the plot, so I have to be fully prepared. The first is weapons. The cheap parents of the predecessor were certainly Chinese, but after more than 10 years in a place like Sokovia, there are still means of self-protection. 2 Beretta 92 pistols, plus 4 cartridge bullets. Doing business in places like Eastern Europe doesn't work without weapons. It's just a pity that the weapons prepared by the predecessor's parents are pretty much the same as those of the little gangsters. When encountering missiles that fall from the sky, there is really no way to fight back. But with these 2 guns, it is enough to deal with the dangers that may be encountered on the ship. Then Li Qingyuan quickly opened the bedroom safe again and pulled out a few gold bars from it. Thanks to her former parents, the second daughter of the Chinese family, for their good habit of depositing private money. There are not only a large amount of cash in the safe, but also a lot of gold bars. Those dollars brought to Titan Nick's world are absolutely impossible to use. After all, the timeline of the story world is only 1912, and the paper currency versions are different. But the gold bar is the hard currency of the heavens and the world, and you can definitely take a few bars to cope with emergency needs at any time. By the way, he put the kitchen fruit knife belt on his belt. He was about to look through the utility room to see if there was a life buoy or something like that. Although he is 99% sure that he can escape from the ship, but God knows if the system will play with himself and throw himself directly into the sunken ship. So it is necessary to prepare a life buoy in advance. Just before he opened the door of the utility room, he heard the cold voice of the system and started to remind him. The preparation time is over. The transmission will begin in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. The originally awake head suddenly became dizzy. It seemed that countless light spots were passing by in the mist. Li Qingyuan wanted to take a closer look at what those light spots were, but instantly felt a buzzing in his brain. He closed his eyes quickly. He had never killed a pig before, but he had eaten pork. Knowing that this situation is because his strength is too low to withstand the side effects of the so-called turbulence of time and space, he simply closed his eyes to feel better. Ding! The host has been successfully transferred. Please integrate into the current environment within 10 minutes, and the main mission will be released in 10 minutes. Li Qingyuan opened his eyes when he heard the voice in his head. What's this smell? He just opened his eyes, and he had to cover his nose quickly. Chapter 4. The narrow cabin has a disgusting smell. Li Qingyuan covered his nose with his hand, feeling depressed and annoyed. I knew I had brought a mask, or else I could bring a bottle of air freshener. The smell was as disgusting as the sewer pipe of an apartment building suddenly burst and then radiated after being exposed to the sun. This can definitely be regarded as a chemical attack, with its own highly toxic effects. What is this place? The protection time of the system is only 9.5 minutes left, So even if the smell is really irritating, he can only hold back and start looking around. This is a small cabin with a total area of less than 10 square meters. It doesn't even have a window. If it weren't for the dim light bulb above his head, he would really think it was a coffin. There were countless living things piled up all around, and the ground was covered with things like straw and cotton wool. And the disgusting stench radiated from these things. I'm not being sent directly to the garbage dump, right? Li Qingyuan deliberately left this place where people couldn't settle down, but the protection time of the system hadn't arrived yet, so he could only stay here and endure the stench. Fortunately, when it was sent, a brief memory was sent by the way, so that he could understand his current situation. The identity assigned to him by the system was a businessman from the Qing dynasty, who was going to the United States by boat to prepare for business. It stands to reason that he originally bought a third-class ticket, but because those crew members looked down on people, they directly arranged him to the employee cabin on the ground floor. No way, this year is still my Qing dynasty. The Chinese go out with their own aura of inferiority. It is normal to be discriminated against. The cabin area is not as big as an ordinary kitchen, but it was stuffed with 9 Chinese, and there was not even a breathable window. The environment inside can be imagined. Before coming, he roughly recalled the plot and historical information about the Titan Nick. He still remembered that there were indeed 8 Chinese laborers on board at that time. But now that there is no one in the cabin, I think I should have gone to work. These years, Chinese are a discriminated class all over the world, and their situation is not much better than that of black slave labor. From the fact that customers who bought tickets were thrown into the warehouse, we can see the miserable situation of the Chinese. If you meet a young and passionate young man, you might be ready to work hard for the rise of XX at this time, but as a middle-aged man with a mental age of close to 40, Li Qingyuan feels that it is better to play steadily. After all, this is just a story world, and besides, with his current strength, he can't make waves. It's still better to see what the tasks are released by the system, and just mix some rewards at that time. System. Open my properties panel. In just 10 minutes from the journey to the present, he has experienced his first visit to the Marvel world plus the Scarlet Witch in lowly state. He also turned on the personal system and was sent to the story world. In the middle, he was delayed because of the search for supplies. Yes, he doesn't even have the effort to blink when he is busy. So until now, he has time to take a closer look at his attribute panel. Name, Li Qingyuan. Race, male terrestrial. Strength, 4, 5 agility. 5, 5 physique. 5, 5 spirit. 8, 5 skills. None. Very concise attribute version. There is no messy evaluation and spitting. It can be seen that my system is a very formal original authentic, not the coquettish goods that hang the system name and slander outside. The strength is slightly lower than that of a normal person, but considering that this body has just been 18 years old, there is still room for development, so it can be seen that the predecessor still pays more attention to exercise. As for why the spirit is so much higher than the normal person, I think it should be because of the integration of the soul of the predecessor. The mental power of 2 people is definitely much stronger than that of 1 person. It's just that the empty skill column is really speechless. Anyway, I have been in this society for more than 10 years. How come I haven't even gotten a single skill? I don't know when the plot is going now. It's really difficult to handle my current status. Touching his chin, he began to think carefully. As for the foul smell in the air, after smelling it for a few minutes, he got used to it. After all, life is like that. James Cameron's Titan Nick, that year was a real adaptation of historical events. The main summary of the whole movie is that the aristocratic Lady Ruth, who was about to go bankrupt, went to New York with her fiancé, Carl, to get married. Jack, a poor boy, also got on the ship with the dream of getting rich and wanted to make a fortune in the United States. During the voyage, the heroine Ruth Winching suffered an illness and felt that she was not living the life she wanted. At this time, the male Jack took advantage of the vacancy, and the male second Jack liked to put on the green hat when he was confused. 1. Definitely, in the final stage, the hero and the heroine are always separated from each other because of the shipwreck, and they have received many tears. When he first watched this movie, he was only a teenager. At that time, he only felt that the love of the hero and the heroine was moving, but later did Li Qingyuan discover it as he got older. Isn't this Nima the same as Aunt Xiong Yao's view of feelings? What the hell did the sad male second do wrong? A person comes from the sky sitting in a hat at home, and by the way is he hacked into a despicable, shameless, greedy villain who is afraid of death? The protection time is up, now the main task is released. Just as he began to think carefully about the plot, and by the way, thinking about how he should start from, he only heard the system's prompt sound suddenly sounded in his mind. Is it an escape mission or a rescue mission? Main line mission. The world line has deviated. The iceberg SW-626 melted on the way due to global climate problems. Please, the host will blow up the Titan Nick cruise ship on the 4th night to restore the world line. Mission reward. 1 free attribute point. Elementary level bomb specialization. Quest failed. Forced to enter the Godzilla 2. King of Monsters plot. Singled out Gulian Godzilla. An old blood choked in his throat and almost suffocated himself to death. Li Qingyuan carefully observed the main task in front of him. Is this damn system playing himself? Good point. Actually telling Lao Tzu to blow up the boat? System, is this task bad? It's easy to make people feel like I'm the villain. Because he had the first bargaining experience, he felt that the sand sculpture system he attached seemed to be quite talkative. We don't ask too much. Change the task to escape? I really can't go and get Ruth. The world line of this story has been changed. In order to prevent the entire world from collapsing, the Titan Nick must be sunk in the original sea area. The system was unmoved and said persistently. Chapter 5. I want to take a position. Sir, you are going to take the position, right? If you want to take the second class, you need to add another 17 pounds. Peters quickly woke up from his doze and said in a panic. If you are caught fishing by your boss during working hours, it is estimated that a reprimand will be indispensable. His task is to be responsible for the various problems of third-class passengers. Strictly speaking, it should be regarded as customer service and after-sales service. Yes, I want to move the position, Li Qingyuan said sadly. What kind of tasks the damn system arranged for him was a bit anti-human, but no matter how outrageous he was, he could only accept it with tears. After all, singled out Godzilla Gulian. This task is used to cheat people no matter what. Not to mention that he is still just an ordinary person. Even if his level is upgraded to the level of superhero, it is estimated that he will be a cool master when he meets Gulian Godzilla. After all, that thing is a monster that can use nuclear bombs as seeds, unless it can reach the level of full-blown Thanos. Otherwise, ordinary superhero can really only give food. But before completing the task, the first thing he needs to solve is his own accommodation problem. He absolutely didn't want to stay in the staff cabin on the ground floor. Not to mention the other places. The smell alone could suffocate people. He flipped over 200-pound notes in the cabin just now, thinking it was the initial startup fund given to him by the system. He is now a businessman from the Qing dynasty who is planning to go to the United States to do business. It is normal for him to carry a large amount of startup capital. In this era, the United Kingdom is a well-deserved world hegemon. The pound sterling is also the most precious currency in the world. 1 pound can be exchanged for $5, and if converted into gold, it can also be exchanged for more than 1 gram. 200 pounds is definitely not a small sum. In the original plot, the actor Jack wants to board the ship, relying on the ticket that he won only after playing cards in the casino. In fact, a third-class ticket only costs 3 pounds. It can be seen that the male protagonist is definitely a pure D****K, the kind of jingle with poor pockets. There is no space left, you should go back. Peters was a little bit worried about being complained, but when he saw that the man standing in front of him was actually an Asian, he immediately pulled him up. Here is 20 pounds. I think there should be a space. Seeing the disgusting face of the fat white man in front of him, as an old man who has been in this society for more than 10 years, Li Qing still doesn't know what he thinks. If it was an ordinary person who asked to lift the cabin, this guy wouldn't dare to talk nonsense at all, but the other person changed his words directly after seeing him. The main reason was his skin color. Britain is still the hegemon of the world these days, but am I clear? Forget it, let's not talk about it. If you talk too much, it will be tears. After receiving the 2 10-yuan notes in his hand, Peters comfortably whistled. Sir, you need to pay another 17 pounds for the second-class cabin. Although he knew that these British guys were dark-hearted and dying, Li Qingyuan never thought that this guy would be so dark. If you don't have money, please go back. Don't hinder my work here. Peters said happily, holding his arms. What can you do if you hack the other party's money? 20 pounds is almost worth his salary for most of the year. I didn't expect this yellow-skinned monkey to be so rich. But this guy speaks good English? Generally speaking, aren't these yellow-skinned monkeys speaking badly? Peters was not afraid of the other party making trouble at all, because on the boat, no one would believe what the other party said. A few years later, Europe may go to the other extreme, but in this age, racial discrimination is definitely politically correct. I'll buy a second-class ticket. Although he could not wait to take out a pistol from his arms and kill the damn white fat man in front of him. After carefully weighing the current situation, Li Qingyuan had no choice but to suppress the anger in his heart. took out 2 10 yuan banknotes and said, "Don't be angry, don't be angry. This fat man won't live for a few days anyway. Here are the keys. Find them yourself." Peters threw a ferry ticket and key directly to him, and then stuffed the 20 pounds into the drawer. "Definitely, change or something, there will never be any." Li Qingyuan, who is depressed, will naturally not be entangled with the other party for the 3 champions. Anyway, he will buy a coffin for the other party. Originally, he was a little unbearable about the tasks that the system arranged for him. Even if he knew that the world was virtual, all the characters in the plot had nothing to do with him. However, as a man for more than 30 years, he was still quite obedient. Good, law-abiding citizens are always a little bit reluctant for that kind of frantic task. But now, after going through some pointers on the road, he felt that it would be better for the broken ship to sink sooner. Oh my God! How can the White Star Company allow a lower-class person to appear in the upper class? This guy should be Japanese, right? Isn't this kind of person supposed to stay in third class? How can he stay here? The third-class cabins are basically below the deck, while the second-class cabins are located above the deck. So when Li Qingyuan appeared on the deck, the white people standing on the deck watching the scenery all turned on the taunt mode. The so-called gentleman's demeanor is a question that will only be considered after eating. The Europeans today and the Virgin Mary in 100 years are completely two extreme products. Anyone who sees him along the way will say something casually. Roar. Enduring the mood of being watched as a rare animal by others, he found his cabin. Li Qingyuan opened the door and walked in, only to calm down the grief and anger in his heart a bit. To be honest, even though I knew that Chinese had no social status in Europe and the United States when I studied history before, the things that appear in the book are just appearances, and only when I personally experience it can I truly comprehend it. After taking a deep breath, he calmed down. Don't have general knowledge with a group of dead men. Lying in the cabin, Li Qingyuan began to think about the possibility of completing this mission. Sinking the Titanic is not a simple matter. When watching a movie, I feel that sinking a ship seems to be very simple, but in fact, when you are inside such a top luxury cruise ship, you will know how unrealistic the project is. Titanic is 270 meters long, 30 meters wide, and has 9 floors. It can be said to be a mobile fortress. Not to mention that he does not have any heavy firepower at all. Even if he is given a few grenades, it is impossible. The ship was blown up. After all, a cruise ship of this tonnage has considered various emergencies when it leaves the factory. If you want to dig a hole and sink this behemoth, it can only be said that the thinking is too naive. Chapter 6. The starry sky over the sea is really beautiful. Jack Dawson lay on the deck bench, looking at the stars in the sky, and exclaimed, "Britain is now the world's hegemon, and at the same time the world's largest environmental pollution. London is called the Fog City because of the high use of coal, which causes the entire sky to be gray. If there is any PM 2.5 detection in this era, it is estimated that the value of London can directly explode." As a wandering painter, Jack had seen many beautiful scenery, but it was the first time he saw a starry sky as beautiful as tonight. There is no way. Although he was bragging and boasting, he was actually just a penniless pauper. Apart from a handsome face, he had no other advantages at all. The reason why he fled from Europe to the United States this time, apart from the dream of making a fortune, the biggest fundamental reason is that he owes a lot of romantic debts here. It is said that several British guys who are wearing hats are preparing to get them. He died. So Jack had no choice but to run away from home. By the way, those British guys really don't have the slightest gentleman's spirit. When they wanted to repair home appliances for others in France, even if the male owner who was driven home hits the other party, he would at most softly ask to remember to wear insulated gloves, who was like those the British guy actually wanted to shout and scream at himself. If you don't use home appliances for a long time, there will be various minor problems. I help them repair them for free and don't charge any fees. It's like the legendary sun is coming. Those guys don't know how to be grateful, and they are disrespectful to themselves. Speechless. Thinking of this, Jack suddenly thought of the beautiful girl that he saw on the deck in the afternoon. Although the distance between the two was still 2 decks away, he dared to swear in the name of repairing appliances for many years, that girl is definitely still our original factory. If it weren't for the cruise ship now, Jack would definitely try his best to get close to that girl. After all, with his experience in repairing home appliances, that kind of silly white sweetness of aristocratic family would be the best to cheat. Think of the name of his Western European small silver gun. It was blown out by a mouth. It's just a pity that the girl looked like a first-class passenger, but he was only a third-class passenger. Titan Nick strictly abides by the different treatments between the various levels. First-class passengers can go anywhere on the cruise ship at will, but third-class passengers cannot set foot on the second deck at all. So unless the girl ran down with a stupid brain, otherwise the two of them wouldn't even want to talk. The starry sky is really good. Just as Jack was considering whether he should get up and go under the deck to hook up a gypsy girl to get through this long journey, a figure suddenly appeared beside him. "Hello, I'm Qingyuan Li. What's your name?" Looking at the slightly startled actor, Li Qingyuan smiled and greeted him roar. After clearing his thoughts in the cabin, he was ready to complete the task properly, but when he was really ready to do it, he found that he had no clue at all. In the original plot, Titan Nick sank because it hit an iceberg, and according to various scientific data analysis later, if the main structure of the ship was not destroyed when it hit the iceberg, then the ship might not sink. So now he has two main tasks. One is to get the structure diagram of the ship and find the structural points of the ship. The second is to see if there are any black market merchants on board and find them to buy explosives with sufficient power. The structure of the ship is easy to find because this is the maiden voyage of the Titan Nick, so its chief designer Thomas Andrews is also on board, and he definitely has the structure in his hand. As for explosives, the black market merchants on board definitely have them, but I don't know how much inventory they have. However, although he has analyzed the task clearly, he cannot easily accomplish these 2 points. As the chief designer, Andrews, by the way, is a well-known top talent in all of Europe. Naturally, he lives in the first class. Even if he lives in the second class, it is not a general difficulty for him to talk to each other. After all, his identity, even if he is willing to spend money to buy first-class tickets, those who want to come will not sell it to him. And although the black market merchants only look at money and not people, if no one is a mediator, they would definitely be at a loss if they go to the bottom to find them. So after thinking about it for half an afternoon, Li Qingyuan decided to look for the man in charge of the show, that is, the scumbag named Jack Dawson in front of him. "Jack Dawson, Qingyuan Li, are you from the Qing dynasty?" Jack the scumbag jumped up from the chair and showed off his extraordinary waist and abdomen skills. Those in the first and second class cabins can give pointers to Li Qingyuan's appearance, but as a penniless poor boy, Jack is not in the mood and emboldened to complain about an Oriental who seems to be rich. Even if the Orientals are now inferior people in Europe, he is just a wandering painter who can make a living by cheating women with money. Everyone has the right to look down on each other. Besides, it is said that the rich among the Orientals are very rich. If you can deduct some money from the other party's pocket, you may have all the money to go to the United States. "Jack, I think you are a man with a great story." He stretched out his hand and shook the opponent, and then Li Qingyuan began his strategic plan. According to the plot, after a while, the heroine Ruth will rush down from the first-class cabin because of some trivial matters, and then run to the stern position to commit suicide by jumping into the sea. God knows what Baifume's brain looks like. A guy like her who was born superior to others is still thinking about suicide. What does this make the masses of laboring people think? Definitely, the more stupid the heroine's brain is, the more beneficial it will be for him to wait. If he meets a smart and capable person, Li Qingyuan has no absolute certainty that he can fool him. But before fooling that silly Baitian, he needs to get rid of the guy who is getting in the way. That definitely, I can say that I am the person with the most stories in London. Do you want to listen to my story? Jack Dawson immediately became energetic when he heard Li Qingyuan's praise of himself. Normally, he is too lazy to chat with men. After all, in this free time, he can definitely rely on his own face to tease 2 little girls who are not involved in the world or young women who are in urgent need of repairs because their husbands are in the outer room all year round. But considering that the Oriental man in front of him seemed to be very rich, Jack decided to make it difficult for him to talk a little bit with him. "No, but Jack, I have something I want to find you." Li Qingyuan definitely has nothing to talk about with this scumbag. He just wants to drive him out. "Jack, I am a businessman and want to buy some contraband, but because I am an Oriental, other people will not sell me at all. Do you know where there is a black market? As a scumbag, you can have a good relationship with others." Said it was Jack's survival law, so he could definitely find it in the black market on the ship. Chapter 7. With a fee of £5, he sent Jack to help him find a black market merchant. Li Qingyuan was able to lie down on the bench where Jack was just now and look up at the stars. Jack's expression just now obviously took him as a fool. £5 is enough for the other party to spend more than a month in London. Now he only needs to help contact the businessman to get so much money. Obviously in Jack's heart, Li Qingyuan must have already equated people with stupid money. But if the unlucky child knew that he had lost the greatest opportunity of his life because of a mere £5, he would definitely regret his intestines. As for saying that although he lost his love, he reaped his life? Don't be funny. Without Ruth's silly white sweetness as a springboard, Jack is just a poor third-class messenger until the end of his life. When the cruise ship sinks, he will definitely be buried in the sea with the ship. After all, third-class cabins have no human rights. After about 10 minutes, he heard a rush of footsteps as he was counting the stars. Well, the heroine is on stage. Li Qingyuan followed behind and watched the woman wearing a red low-cut evening dress rush to the back of the deck in one breath, shaking with her hands on the railing. She definitely trembled. This girl wore an evening gown. It is estimated that it was all in a vacuum. The temperature in the North Atlantic Ocean is below 10 degrees. Ruth was attending a dinner with other people in the first-class banquet hall just now, but she couldn't help it only halfway through. Every day is a boring party and dinner. Every day, she wears a mask of a good girl to greet others with a smile. Such a depressive life has made her about to collapse. Ruth DeWitt Bouquet, the only legal heir of the Bouquet family, her father was an Earl Pro appointed by Her Majesty the Queen of Great Britain, and also once served as the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, by the way. When the old Booker was still alive, their family was considered a noble family, but when the old Booker passed away from tuberculosis, the Booker family fell instantly. No way. Both Ruth and her mother are both file-size sisters who are completely ignorant of world affairs. Both of them are the kind of masters who only spend money but not make money, especially because they spend money at a speed that is not so fast. So the legacy left by old Booker was quickly spent, and Ruth DeWitt Booker, who felt that he was about to become a poor man, was the mother of sister Ruth File-Size. He immediately thought of one good idea. Although the Bouquet family has become a yellow flower yesterday because of the death of the old Bouquet, in the eyes of some people, the Bouquet family is still a high-quality asset. Even after 100 years, those upstarts will be happy to find a famous ancestor for themselves, let alone now. The Booker family is an Earl certified by the Queen, and Miss Ruth Booker is even more beautiful, and by the way is the first heir to the title. For those emerging rich, they certainly have money, but it does not prevent them from wanting to add a noble title to their family. So after thousands of choices, Mrs. Ruth Booker finally found a perfect home for her daughter. Carl Hockley, the Steel King from the United States, owns more than a dozen steel factories in the United States and is a handsome millionaire. The millionaires of this year are truly top rich people, and they are not a creature of the same dimension at all from those millionaires of later generations. Carl Hockley fully meets the standards of all diamond kings and elders, young and golden and suave, definitely the type that a woman can't fit her legs when she sees it. In everyone's eyes, Ruth and Carl can be considered a match made in heaven. But in Ruth's personal feelings, she seemed to be a puppet, controlled by her mother to choose her own life. In particular, because Carl is the president of the Hockley Group, his style of behavior naturally brings the shadow of a somewhat overbearing president. This style is estimated to be crazy for little girls in 100 years, but for Ruth, for sister File-Size, she felt that the other party did not respect herself at all. In Ruth's impression, that guy Carl was an arrogant man, and the reason why he was willing to marry himself was only for his noble title. So when the two of them had a dispute over some trivial matters, Ruth ran out of the first-class cabin on the excuse of going to the bathroom. In fact, she herself didn't know why she wanted to run out. But people, there are always times when she suddenly feels dizzy. She held the railing at the stern, wondering where she should go. After staring at it for 10 minutes, Li Qingyuan was sure that this File-Size sister had no intention of jumping into the sea at all. Even if she thinks about it, as the top white rich beauty in London, even if Ruth is very dissatisfied with her current life, she will never think of suicide because of such a small matter. The main reason why she almost fell into the sea in the plot was because there was a chattering male protagonist beside her. In fact, the people who jump into the sea and the building are the same. If she is the only one, then she will take the initiative to leave for at most 10 minutes. After all, not everyone has the courage to die. And if there are onlookers nearby, by the way, when the onlookers are still talking nonsense, then it will give the person who is about to jump off a strange illusion, as if to encourage her to jump down. Because the messenger Jack had been sent to the cabin to find a businessman. So now no one came to pull Ruth to talk nonsense, and this File-Size sister was blown by the cold wind for 10 minutes, and blood was surging in his head. It also slowly cooled down. Oh, see, what are you talking about? It's an eternal question. Sky, what's your answer? It's eternal silence. Just as Ruth wondered if it would be shameful if she went back so sullenly, she only heard a burst of poetry coming from behind her. As a severely literary and youthful patient, Ruth is the least resistant to the so-called artist. It can be seen from the fact that she was deceived by the crappy and vagrant painter in just a few days and could not find north. Definitely, although Ruth File Size has all kinds of silly abilities, but at least one thing, she is still very good at art appreciation. So after hearing this poem, Ruth instantly forgot her purpose of running out, but began to look at the source of the sound. Excuse me, did you write the poem just now? Ruth straightened her slightly messy dress, walked lightly behind Li Qingyuan, and asked in a low voice. Excuse me? Hearing Ruth's voice, Li Qingyuan made a victory sign in his heart and turned around slowly. Chapter 8. I have to say that, like the original male protagonist, using the life experience that Ruth has never touched can definitely stir up an unworldly girl's heart, but the consequence of doing so is to abandon the entire aristocratic class. It is true that this Ruth in front of him is very big. It is not right. It is very white. It is not right. Forget it. Let's not talk about it. Anyway, that's what it means. Li Qingyuan forced himself, raised his eyes slightly, and aimed at Ruth's face. This woman was absolutely deliberate. She actually dressed like this and jumped into the sea, and she didn't know what she thought. The 18-year-old Winslet is definitely at the peak of his appearance, and the round and spherical object in the future is completely at two extremes. The current Winslet, no, it's Ruth. Ruth's body shape is the kind of fat that men think of as the so-called fat, thin. This kind of figure can definitely be called a peerless beauty in the Tang dynasty plus a body that is almost naked. The dress is really hard to concentrate. Fortunately, as a middle-aged man with a mental age of close to 40, Li Qingyuan has now passed the age of blood and energy. He controlled himself with great perseverance and tried to pretend to be nonchalant. This poem was sent by me just looking at the starry sky. I didn't expect to meet such a beautiful lady at this time. Ruth DeWitt Buchert, it's nice to meet you. Compared to other people's discrimination against Orientals, Ruth, who is silly and sweet, doesn't have that kind of concept. Instead, she stretched out her hand very happily. Li Qingyuan introduced himself. After all, in her cognition, an artist who can write such an aesthetic poem is worthy of admiration and admiration. Qingyuanli, Miss Ruth, I am also very happy to know you. Holding Ruth's little white hand, Li Qingyuan showed a harmless smile. The two soon talked about the so-called art of poetry, even though he said that the poems written by Westerners can also be called poetry, but it did not prevent him from using it to fool the silly white sweet chick in front of him. At any rate, he is also a legendary street writer. He knows all these words well. If he meets those masters who are proficient in literature, he will be vulnerable, but he is used to fool such aristocratic file-size sister Ruth. It's more than enough. Life is as gorgeous as summer flowers, and death is as quiet and beautiful as autumn leaves. Ruth muttered the two poems she just asked from Li Qingyuan, and instantly felt that she was almost wet. She was able to write such touching language, and the poet from the Qing dynasty in front of her immediately made her feel like she hated not meeting her when she was not married. No way, literary and young girls, especially those girls like Ruth who have not been beaten by the society, always have a lot of unrealistic fantasies. If Li Qingyuan's mission in this world is to take Ruth down, then he can now declare that the mission is complete. It's just a pity that his mission is so frantic, so he can only push away Ruth, who is about to stick to him, with a pity, and keep a little distance between the two. No way. He still needs this silly Baitian and her fiancé's contacts to clear the relationship for himself. Pushed away, Ruth File Size realized how frivolous she was just now. Although the British do not pay as much attention to the affairs of men and women as the Orientals, but they have just met each other, so it is indeed somewhat arrogantly. Well, I just wanted to discuss poetry culture with you. Ruth decided to save some points for her presumptuous behavior, at least not to let the distant Eastern poet in front of him regard herself as a frivolous woman. Ms. Ruth, your knowledge of poetry makes me admire. For an intellectual woman like you, I can't find a second one in London. It is true that he can't directly push the horse for the smooth completion of the task. You can say a few good things without spending money. Maybe you want to use her to change your taste after completing the task in 2 days. The awkward atmosphere between the two was immediately swept away, and they sat down on the bench together to study the so-called poetry. Mr. Qingyuan, I found the person you were looking for. A panting Jack ran up from below the deck. Just now, he used his special skills and learned the position of the black market merchant on the ship from the gypsy girl. Me rushed back, ready to find the bully for a reward. To know that the total area of the Titanic is close to an ordinary township, Jack can find his mission goal in a short period of time, which can only be said to be the son of luck in the plot. But when he saw Ruth sitting side by side with Li Qingyuan, he suddenly felt that something important in his life had been taken away. "Hello, beautiful lady. My name is Jack Dawson, and I am glad to meet you." Jack quickly sorted out his embarrassed appearance from running, and then approached Ruth with the most perfect smile. Ruth raised her head and nodded slightly. Her mind is now full of the verses Li Qingyuan said to her just now. If it weren't for the good education all the year round, she wouldn't want to care about this guy who suddenly popped out. "I am." Seeing Ruth being quite indifferent to him, Jack quickly raised his voice and prepared to start his own pickup mode. Of course, this girl seems to have a fiancé, and by the way, she is still a first-class sister file size, and she seems to have some good feelings with her new employer by the way. But what's wrong with this? Jack Silvergun, professional maintenance of home appliances for 30 years. Dawson, how can he give up his goal because of such a small difficulty? Jack, what do you think is the most thought-provoking sentence in Shelley's Ode to the West Wind? Li Qingyuan asked calmly when he saw that Jack, the B************************ D, wanted to pry the corner face to face. Shelley, the West Wind from the snow? Jack was suddenly speechless. He learned a pretty good sketching technique by relying on his ability to pretend to be a wandering painter all day long. Can indeed hook up a lot of ignorant girls. But what did you tell him about Shelley or Byron? Do you think he has money to study? If I'm a fallen leaf floating with you, if I'm a flying cloud with you flight. Although Jack didn't know, Ruth, who was a literary girl, immediately replied, "I like Shelley's 2 poems the most. They are simply the sweetest interpretation of love." Looking at the 2 guys talking weird words, Jack felt that his outlook on life was under attack. Can you call a poem even with that shit sentence? Chapter 9. Ruth. When Li Qingyuan talked with the silly white sweet file-size sister for about half an hour, Ruth's fiancé Carl, the bitter master of the original plot, finally found out. Carl had been chatting with other people in the banquet hall very well, but turned around and realized that his fiancé didn't know where he was going. Carl, who suddenly felt a green light flashing on his forehead, rushed out with his bodyguard. But he knew that his fiancé seemed to have something abnormal in his brain, and God knew if her brain was hot and did something strange. Fortunately, when Carl found Ruth, she was neatly dressed and chatting with others. It might be a little ambiguous to say that a man and a woman sit and chat together in the big evening, but if it is 2 men and a woman, nothing will happen if you think about it. This is why Li Qingyuan didn't drive away the crappy light bulb next to him. Jack, this kid can not only be used as a background board, but also as a personal identification for himself by the way. Otherwise, just rely on Ruth to look at her fiery eyes, and God knows if the other party has any evil thoughts. Never underestimate the enthusiasm of a silly fan. They are simply a bunch of irrational guys. Carl, this is the great poet Qingyuan Li from the Far East. Ruth excitedly introduced to her fiancé. Hello, should I call Roar you Mr. Li? As a millionaire, Carl Hockley's knowledge is much higher than that of his stupid fiancé and poor boy Jack. At the very least, he knows how to call Roar others accurately. Is Mr. Hockley the president of the Hockley Group? Li Qingyuan stretched out his hand to shook the Green Riding Hood in the original book and asked by the way. Yes, is Mr. Li also interested in the steel industry? Carl frowned slightly. Although he was a bit dissatisfied with the sudden appearance of 2 men next to Ruth, he could only suppress his unhappiness due to the face of his fiancée. In fact, besides being a poet, I have another identity as Prince Qing's staff. Prince Qing wants to find a partner for himself in the United States. I don't know if Mr. Hockley is interested. Ignoring the contempt in Carl's eyes, Li Qingyuan whispered, Prince Qing? The Qing prince of the Qing dynasty? At first, Carl had some contempt for Li Qingyuan, because for him, a rich man in the top class in Europe and America, despising Orientals is completely politically correct. But when Li Qingyuan told his intentions, his eyes lit up and he held the opponent's hands excitedly. No way, the businessman is chasing profit. As the chairman of the Hockley Group, Carl can never be like Ruth, who only thinks about everything. Qing Prince Ichio, this reputation may not have been heard by many people, but in fact this guy is truly famous in this age. This old guy is more famous in Europe and the United States than the Queen Mother, because many people don't care about the names of those in power in the Middle East or Africa. However, most people still have a lot of people who are closely related to them. Understand, Ichio has a great reputation in Europe and the United States, mainly because he is rich. The Qingji company established by this old boy sells all the official positions of the entire Qing dynasty at a clear price. The 6 books are sent to the ambassador county. There is no credit for cash on delivery. Even Yuan Shirkai spent 3 million taels of silver to buy an official from the other party. One can imagine how ruthless this old thing is. Moreover, Ichio's money has never been kept in the country. All his money has been exchanged for British pounds and US dollars, which are stored in banks in various countries. He is definitely the first person to diversify investment and naked officials in the country. Refusing to complete statistics, just the HSBC in the UK, Ichio has deposited no less than £7 million. You must know that even if it was to build the Titanic, it only cost £1.5 million, and to build the world's top dreadnought battleship, it only cost £2.5 million. It can be said that the current Prince Ching, Ichio, is the well-deserved richest man in the world. Although Carl Hockley is a millionaire, he is a younger brother compared to Prince Ching. For capitalists, they only look at the amount of money, and they won't be negligent just because the other party is an Oriental. What kind of race, skin color, respect, and inferiority these days is it important to have money? Li Qingyuan knew that if he wanted to get into the first-class cabin, there was no hope at all by Ruth, a nymphomaniac. In the original plot, the fat woman Molly Brownkin invested in Jack because the other party was a handsome white guy. God knows that. Does the woman have any weird ideas? But if I want to mingle with these superior people, it is absolutely useless to rely solely on Ruth. The key is to rely on those who are truly in power. It's like talking about the circle of people sitting next to him now. The role of Prince Ching's assistant is better than anything else. In just half an hour, the people around him have changed from Ruth's idiot to directors of several large companies. As the saying goes, fathers and mothers are not as good as money ones. No matter where the rich are, they will definitely be offered as ancestors. The current form of Qing dynasty is very bad. For those low-level tourists, they have not even heard of the term Qing dynasty, but for everyone sitting in this box, their vision is much higher than that of third-class cabins. In the past few years, senior officials of the Qing dynasty have transferred their assets to the United Kingdom, but super bosses like Prince Qing have really never encountered them. After all, the old fellow thief had a brain. Regardless of whether it was Yuan Datu or Sun Depeo, he owed him a lot of favors, so even if the emperor changed several times later, he still died. But this kind of thing is not even known to anyone in the Qing dynasty, let alone these British people on the other side of the earth. It's not that no one has ever doubted Li Qingyuan's identity, but these years I want to find someone who is completely familiar with the internal environment of the Qing country in the international form. Only aliens are not easy. Coupled with the recommendation of Carl Hockley, it only took half a day for Li Qingyuan to successfully break into the enemy's interior and become a first-class guest. By the way, he became a big fat sheep in the eyes of countless businessmen. That's the Prince of Qing who claims to be rich in assets. Even if the other party just leaked a little bit from his fingers, it would be enough to eat for several lifetimes. What's more, Li Qingyuan has also been a street writer for more than 10 years. He knows some general economic concepts. Although it is absolutely impossible for him to make a detailed plan, but pretend to be an expert and just call a few words. It is more than enough. So by the next morning, he had become a hot character on the ship, and the invitations for him to be a guest had been queued 2 months later. Chapter 10. Mr. Li, this is what you want. Jack put the purchased items on the desk with a look of curiosity, not knowing what the adult from the mysterious East did with so many medicines. Thank you, Ruth. Please help me pay for Mr. Jack's goods. Li Qingyuan nodded slightly and told Ruth to settle the bill. Heaven and earth conscience, he really didn't think much of this heroine, because the system task had nothing to do with her at all, and he didn't want to have extra troubles. It was only obvious that he had miscalculated the combat effectiveness of the brain-dead fan. After learning that Li Qingyuan was alone, Miss Ruth relied on her identity advantage to run to him as the chief financial officer. In her original words, what if Mr. Li traveled across the ocean for thousands of miles without a helper by his side? Carl almost turned blue because of this, but he couldn't tell Ruth at all, especially when Li Qingyuan said that he would only let Ruth be his secretary. By the way, he would only help him during the day. Slightly relieved. As for whether he can comprehend the real purpose of the secretary, it is unclear. A total of £32. Jack quoted 3 times the purchase price without a heartbeat. Only then did he really have a good feeling for the chick in front of him. The feeling is like being shot in the heart by Cupid suddenly. However, after several contacts, Jack found that he could not keep up with the other's brain circuits. Now Ruth is full of poems taught by Li Qingyuan, completely turning a blind eye to Jack's flattery. So after experiencing 2 failed performances, Jack has completely released himself. Anyway, the entire Titanic, the third-class gypsy girl does not know how many, and his handsome face does not require much effort. Why? I have to hang on a tree that I don't need. Besides, His most important task now is to make money. As long as he has money, he can become a rich man. Then he wants to play that one? Here's $32. Ruth drew the money from her wallet and handed it to Jack. The latter smiled and even began to reflect in her teeth. Sir, is there anything else I can do for you? Jack stuffed the ink-flavored banknote into his pocket and asked slightly flatteringly. I only made 20 pounds after running for a day. This kind of business is simply losing money from the sky. Not for the time being. I'll find you again if I have something to do. Li Qingyuan waved his hand directly. He no longer needed this man of destiny now. What he is now racking his brains is how to reduce the formula of nitroglycerin. As a street writer, you must have a certain understanding of the so-called messy knowledge of cement manufacturing, glass casting, gunpowder composition, hybrid rice, etc. Skills are the only way for the protagonist to make a fortune. But it is simple to say and difficult to sit up. It is like the simplest black powder. Everyone knows the ratio of 1 carbon, 2 nitrate, and 3 sulfur, but it is estimated that there are not hundreds of trials, and I am afraid it is difficult to really do it. Besides, with the size of Titan Nick, it is really difficult for the black powder to blow it down, so he can only choose the more powerful yellow powder. It is the yellow powder invented by the alchemist Nobel. The medicines he asked Jack to buy were all medicines for the treatment of angina. The basic ingredients of these things are nitroglycerin, and only a little filtering can get extremely high-purity nitroglycerin. Then, just pour a little egg white, rust, and fine sand into the nitroglycerin, stir evenly, add the plant ash and air dry, and you can get the frightening yellow gunpowder. In the 21st century, this kind of trick can be obtained on the internet as long as it is intentional, but in this age, it is an unspoken secret in major laboratories, so he is not afraid of being discovered by others, because others even see it. I don't know what he is doing. As for the formulas and data written in the diary, if you can find a chemist who is proficient in Chinese on the Titan Nick, then it can only be said that the system is maliciously increasing the difficulty. At first he wanted to buy explosives directly on the black market, but after learning about the black market, he had to give up that plan. It is true that as black market merchants, they don't care about what is prohibited or not. Those merchants do have explosives on their hands, but they are just scattered black powder particles, and the weight is so small that it is unbelievable. Li Qingyuan wondered whether he could hold a firework show even if he collected all the explosives from the black market on the ship. With those black gunpowder, I wanted to survive and burn a hole in the bottom plate of Titan Nick. You know that for a giant cruise ship like Titan Nick, the bottom steel plate alone is 5 centimeters thick. With the addition of various interlayers, the thickness of the bottom plate is estimated to be more than half a foot. Just blow a big hole. 2 or 3 square holes may be a fatal threat to small ships, but they have no effect on the Titan Nick at all. The water seepage problem was considered when the ship was built, so 20 airtight cabins were specially designed. Even if 4 airtight cabins see water, the other 16 airtight cabins can ensure the safety of the entire ship. In the original plot, it sank mainly because the iceberg smashed 5 airtight cabins all at once, and then too much water entered the back of the ship, which caused the entire ship to be tilted and then broke from the middle. Thinking of this, Li Qingyuan suddenly felt helpless. He stretched out his palm and scratched his forehead. How could this task feel unreliable? The explosives in one's hand can blow up 2 compartments even if it is dead. If it is distributed to 5 compartments, then maybe even the steel plate will not be broken. As for collecting more materials to make explosives, let alone whether there are so many raw materials on the ship, he can't be too busy himself. Making explosives is not about moving bricks. You have to find someone to get it. It is estimated that the other party has already exploded the cabin before you go out. Nobel, the alchemist at the time, also made the yellow explosive after he sacrificed his whole family. Qingyuan, did you think of any wonderful poems? Seeing Li Qingyuan scratching her ears, Ruth suddenly felt that the other party had such a temperament. Even the way she was thinking was so handsome. No way, when a person is crazy and obsessed, even if you shit, she will feel that your strength is completely different from others. Ruth walked gently behind Li Qingyuan and then gently approached him. Mr. Li I. Carl Hockley pushed the door directly in, and then found a scene that made his forehead flash green. In other words, why does Mr. Li's head rest on his fiancée's big white? Chapter 11. It is true that Carl said that his fiancée is indeed very big and white, and sometimes he can't help but want to play a few basketballs, but that is his legal fiancée after all. What is the situation now? Mr. Hockley, you are here. Facing Carl's green face, Li Qingyuan was not embarrassed at all, but enthusiastically recruited roar. The conscience of heaven and earth, he really didn't have the hobby of putting hats on each other, And to blame, he could only blame silly Batian for being too active. Anyway, he has an absolute clear conscience, and a person as upright as himself is naturally impossible to do anything illegal. Originally, Carl was still wondering about the relationship between Ruth and Li Qingyuan, but when he saw Li Qingyuan's behavior, he started to wonder what he thought. Did you make a mistake just now? Ruth should be massaging each other, right? I must be too nervous. This Mr. Li looks very decent. Besides, it seems that Asians seem to be very cautious about the relationship between men and women. As an excellent male second, Carl is quite open-minded in dealing with Ruth's lifestyle. In the original plot, even if Ruth and Jack are both staying and flying, he can resist pretending not to see it. In the end, Ruth insisted on asking Jack to draw a picture of an erotica for herself, and then put the picture on the table to show Carl deliberately, which made him angry and abandon the goodness he had always been. After all, encountering such a thing, it is an individual who cannot bear it. You fooled with other wild men outside and made me lose face, and you even sent the photos directly to your hands. This is nothing more than murder. So when Li Qingyuan spoke with him righteously, Carl said that he definitely thought too much. Mr. Li, you said that the chief financial officer of Prince Qing is already waiting for your drive in New York. I want to ask, do you have any investment plans for your trip to New York this time? On the one hand, because the ability he showed was really convincing. At any rate, it is more than 100 years ahead of the knowledge. Although he certainly can't tell the details in terms of specifics, it is still easy to fool people in the general direction. What is even more trustworthy is that Li Qingyuan said that Prince Qing's financial controller in the United States has been waiting at the New York port. As soon as the ship docks, he will preside over the investment of Prince Qing's assets in the United States, with total assets of up to £2 million. With such a huge sum of £2 million, let alone a mere Carl, even if it is a card too, he has to kneel and talk now. As for whether the other party is a liar, the ship will arrive in New York in at most 7 or 8 days. If it is a liar, who would dare to speak such a big deal? Can he fly to the sky if he lied to others? For the sake of £2 million, Carl decided to define the scene he saw just now as a head massage. After 2 days of understanding, I think the thematic investment should now be in railways and movies. Li Qingyuan flipped out a so-called plan and said while flipping it. Anyway, no one here can understand Chinese characters, and these people can only stare at what he wrote. Movies? Qingyuan, are you planning to invest in movies? Before Carl could speak, Ruth instantly became excited. Movies are still a new industry this year, and it has only been 40 years since its invention. It is definitely a sunrise industry. Moreover, the current film and television industry is relatively tall. Movie stars are basically decent celebrities, and there are few messy hidden rules. Female stars are all respected by thousands of people. Even if their private lives are chaotic, they will not be as filthy as later generations. Unbearable. Especially for Ruth, who is a playful and active and silly and sweet. Making a movie is definitely an exciting thing for her. That's the plan. To be honest, if it wasn't for the mission to blow up the Titan Nick the day after tomorrow, he was really ready to go to Hollywood to make a movie. Great. How about letting me be the heroine then? I can definitely do it. Ruth smiled at him, then turned to reveal her figure. Speaking of mind, although Ruth's waist is slightly thicker than those slender waists, she has other advantages. Seeing this, Li Qingyuan really diverged his thinking a little bit. With hundreds of years of advanced experience, as well as familiar with all kinds of classic film and television dramas, he can get into the position of the godfather of Hollywood no matter how much he can. At that time, it will not be the rotation of various big-name actresses. With heavy kind, even female stars can change for male stars if they get tired of it. Forget it, I don't want that much. I am a decent person, and I definitely can't think so dirty. Well, Mr. Li, do you think you want to know more about steel? Carl was already immune to the surprise of his fiancée. With such a fiancée on the stall, I can only say why I was blindfolded by her bewitched appearance in Dubai in the first place. Just like her, she doesn't look like a noble lady. Steel? The industry looks good now, but I think the potential is limited, and there is a great possibility that it will collapse in the next 20 years. Li Qingyuan shook his head, still remembering that this guy Carl seemed to be in an economic crisis more than 10 years later. Committed suicide by jumping off the building in bankruptcy. Seeing that the other party was relatively respectful to him in the past 2 days, Li Qingyuan felt that he could pull the other party somehow, even if the bill is paid. Mr. Li, our Hockley group is now studying new types of steel. Believe me, as long as the development is successful, it will definitely lead a new round of steel innovation. If you invest now, you can get at least 3 times, no, 5 times the return. For Li Qingyuan's statement that the steel market will collapse within 20 years, Carl is absolutely unbelievable, but now he also urgently needs new investment because the R&D of the Hockley Group has reached a critical moment. Any technological innovation is inseparable from a huge amount of funds. Even if the Hockley Group is a giant in the steel industry, it is somewhat dwarfed by the astronomical amount of research and development funding. Originally, Carl had already planned to give up research and development, but now that he met a big gold master from the Qing dynasty on the ship, he would naturally not give up this opportunity. Mr. Hockley, I really think that the steel industry is already in the inflationary stage. I think investing in the steel industry is definitely not. Li Qingyuan was about to send Carl, but halfway through his words, he was blocked by a report from the other party. Mr. Hockley, I think the steel technology innovation you just mentioned is very promising. I want to study it carefully. Chapter 12. Brother Carl, good man. While pretending to be nonchalant and observing the bottom tank of Titan Nick, Li Qingyuan spoke. Mr. Li, what are you talking about? As a guide, Jack felt as if he was about to be cooked. Like all cruise ships, the bottom layer of the Titan Nick is the power layer, which is what most people call the boiler room. A giant boiler that is more than 10 meters high is roaring, and nearly 100 workers are shoveling coal into the boiler at a fast speed, so that this behemoth can obtain sufficient power. Nothing. Regarding the guy Carl, it was because of his wife's face that Li Qingyuan had to give him a good face, but facing a scum like Jack, he didn't need to care at all. This may be the so-called same*X repulsion. For a guy like Jack who brushes women with his face, the whole earth will be left alone. If there are more good people like Carl, the world will definitely become better. Originally, he was still thinking about how to blow up the ship safely and effectively, because there was only one chance. If he couldn't sink the ship in one shot, it would be impossible to cause a second damage. However, because of the power and weight of the explosives, he wondered whether he could complete the mission. After all, he had racked his brains to get these explosives, and it was completely wishful thinking to get more explosives. But now, those are not problems anymore. The steel report form that Carl sent him showed that the vulcanized steel used now has an innocuous defect. That is, the steel currently produced will undergo a cold brittle reaction in an environment close to zero. That is, the steel at that time will be as fragile as glass. Definitely, it is just a metaphor to be as fragile as glass, but it is undeniable that steel will be much more brittle than normal at low temperatures. This is determined by today's industrial environment. The chemical composition of vulcanized steel makes it have such shortcomings, which cannot be solved at all. It's just that this shortcoming is like the formula of yellow powder. It has been controlled by the major steel giants, and the outside world doesn't even know the news. After all, no one will be significantly bored and hit a warship or cruise ship a few times in a 0-degree environment, right? After reading the report that Carl gave him, Li Qingyuan understood why it felt so strange when he first watched the movie. Obviously, it is such a huge amount of cruise ship, and the whole ship will break because of the water in the second half. You must know that even the model will only sink the whole ship. How can it be directly disconnected from the middle? Now he finally understands. The reason is here. At that time, Titan Nick collided with an iceberg. In that low-temperature environment, all the parts in contact with the iceberg became fragile, causing the main body of the ship to fission. We all know that if there is a crack on the glass, it will not be far from breaking. After obtaining the information, Li Qingyuan decided to come to the scene to see the environment. Jack, who was currently the first dogleg under his command, learned that Chief Kim was going to inspect the warehouse, and he immediately volunteered to be a guide. Qingyuan, is there anything good here? Ruth asked, clinging to Li Qingyuan's side. Even if they are still some distance away from the boiler, the temperature here is still so hot that it is hard to control, and Ruth's cheeks are covered with big beads of sweat. Those sweat beads stayed directly along her neck, as if rippling debuts on the exquisite artwork. Jack's eyes turned straight, which made Ruth, who noticed his sight, suddenly feel unhappy. Sister Ruth File Size just got the real value of the medicine from others in the morning, knowing that the glib guy in front of her had actually blacked her by 20 pounds, which annoyed the aristocratic Sister File Size who had always claimed to be an elite. She didn't care about the 20 yuan. After all, no matter how down and out the Bucket family was, it was a noble family, and 20 yuan was really not in her eyes. She was angry that this guy actually dared to lie to herself. He looked a little handsome and seemed to be a wandering painter. Sister Ruth File Size also had a good impression of Jack. In the end, I didn't expect such a guy to deceive herself for 20 yuan, which made Ruth feel that the other party was simply a shameless villain. No way, for Jack, if his goal is to soak Ruth, then he will naturally establish himself as a perfect and good person. But now anyone with long eyes can see that this silly white sweet has all his heart tethered to Li Qingyuan. In this case, Jack will naturally not be boring. So it is only natural to take advantage of the convenience of work to make some extra money for himself? It's nothing. Since I want to take a stake in Mr. Hockley's shareholding group, I have to study it carefully. Li Qingyuan said with a faint smile, patted Ruth with only her arm. This woman, your husband, is standing next to her, so please pay attention to influence. Carl wiped the sweat from his forehead, not knowing whether it was hot or angry. Mr. Li is really careful, and even this kind of thing has to be done by himself. Others, as investors, want to look at the experimental data. As Party B, Carl naturally has no reason to refuse, and even to make Party A's father happy, he didn't even see his wife's embarrassing behavior. Anyway, Carl had decided that when she arrived in New York, she would lock Ruth, the little girl, in the house to prevent her from going out. This woman was really not conscious at all. Although it is said that the rich and powerful couples often play their own roles, but in public, everyone still has to pay attention to a bit of face. You now look like you can't wait to be posted, you don't know it, and you think Ruth is Li Qingyuan's mistress. The matter of the Lord of Food and the Lord of Loyalty, this is part, Li Qingyuan said, arching his hands. Mr. Li, what are you talking about? Carl was a little puzzled. It's nothing, Mr. Hockley, you said that all the steel for Titanic is supplied by Hockley Group. Does that also include this? Li Qingyuan asked Carl after stepping on the bottom silo partition under his foot. They are already 10 meters underwater. If the partition under their feet suddenly splits, it is estimated that all the people in the group will sink directly into the sea to feed the sharks. Yes, but you can rest assured, Mr. Li, that the steel products of the Hockley Group are of quality assurance, and there is absolutely no problem in terms of safety performance. Chapter 13. Yawn. Seeing Li Qingyuan's appearance not awake, Ruth suddenly walked to him with some concern. Qingyuan, don't you have a rest? I have come to write inspiration these 2 nights, so I can't sleep at night. He started working almost 24 hours these 2 days, making explosives and condensation during the day, and ran to the bottom warehouse to smash steel plates at night while it was still at night. After learning that the current vulcanized steel technology had fatal flaws, he started working day and night. Because there was too much movement during the day, he could only smash the boats secretly when there was no one at night. Pour the condensate onto the steel plate of the silo, wait for 10 minutes, wait until the steel plate of the silo begins to form frost, and then slowly tap it again with a small hammer. The cooled steel plates hit by a small hammer seem to have no difference on the surface, but if you look closely, you will find that there are many small patterns on these steel plates. These patterns are so subtle that even if you look with your eyes wide, it is difficult to notice anything abnormal. If you drive normally, there will definitely be no problems. Even if you are hit by fish in the ocean, as long as it is not a large tonnage and powerful killer fish such as sharks, whales, or swordfish, there will be no major problems. But if it is impacted by the aftermath of the explosion, don't think about it. These steel plates will surely shatter like glass. 48 consecutive hours of high-intensity manual labor, and, by the way, to prevent being discovered like a thief, it is really a difficult job for Li Qingyuan. It's also because of the young body he traveled through. If he replaced it with his previous body that had been tortured by various sub-health, I guess he wouldn't want to finish it at all. Do you have any new poems again? Can you tell me to listen? Ruth beamed her eyes and took out a small book from her pocket to record. Someday, I may need to take a break now. He yawned again, and he was really not in the mood to deal with this silly Batian now. It's the task time tonight, so he needs to recharge his energy and use it to deal with the changes that might happen then. Are you going to sleep? But it's 9 o'clock in the morning. Ruth looked at the clock hanging on the wall in surprise, and she couldn't understand someone's biological clock. Ruth, you have to know that as a poet, my biological work and rest are different from ordinary people. The early hours of the night are when my mental state is at its best and most excited. I understand. Then please take a good rest. I will stop the others. A gleam of light flashed in Ruth's eyes, and she nodded. He was not interested in knowing what Ruth had understood, and Li Qingyuan, who had stayed up for 2 days and nights, fell asleep. Well, I don't know how long he slept before he woke up from his dream. In other words, why does it feel like there are more people on the bed? Ruth, why are you here? Looking at the woman next to him, and then at the sky outside, Li Qingyuan suddenly felt that the whole person was a bit bad. To be honest, although he is definitely not a good person, but he is definitely not the kind of person who can't walk when he sees a woman. The girl Ruth has been around these days. If there is seemingly innocent teasing, He can hold on with great perseverance. The most important reason is that he doesn't want to cause trouble at all. He is now able to mix on the Titanic, mainly because he is familiar with the plot and put on a vest on himself. But if he has a relationship with the woman Ruth, God knows if there will be any mess. Things happen. When there is ability, the wave is called a game life, and without ability, it is called death. That's why he didn't respond to Ruth's performance. But he really couldn't think of why this girl would appear next to him. Qingyuan, you are awake. Compared to his doubts, Ruth appeared to be more casual. She didn't care that she didn't wear anything on her body, but rather casually recruited Roar. Well, why are you here? After thinking for a moment, Li Qingyuan felt that he still had to ask. Although this question is a bit too straight for a straight man, he did not do anything since he slept in the morning until now. If this woman wanted to rely on him for this, he would not admit it. I'm here to call you to the dinner party, but when I came, I found that you were still sleeping. By the way, I was a little sleepy, so I borrowed your bed and lie down for a while, Ruth said with a flushed face. Well, I believe you a ghost. Seeing Ruth's appearance that a dead pig is not afraid of boiling water, Li Qingyuan knew that he was wronged by the other party. He had always heard that Western women dared to love and hate, but now he has seen it. It's just that he doesn't know. If he really doesn't want to have a favorite storyline with Ruth, then he must keep a distance with the other party at the beginning, instead of losing his principle by being shaken by the other party and agreeing to let the other party help by his side. In Li Qingyuan's opinion, he is looking for someone to help with the work anyway. Finding a bad guy is definitely better than letting Ruth do it. At least it's seductive, isn't it? But in Ruth's view, that is that this poet from the Far East is actually very interested in him, but because of the inherent reservedness of the Easterners, the other party can't let go. So after thinking about it for a few days, Ruth felt that she should take the initiative. After all, the ship will arrive in New York the day after tomorrow, and based on Carl's performance in the past few days, it is estimated that he will be locked in the manor by the other party when he arrives in the United States. So in order not to leave any regrets in her life, Ruth decided to come directly to a fait accompli. In her opinion, instead of handing it over to the fiancé who she didn't like for the first time, she might as well find someone pleasing to the eye. There is nothing to say about the following plot. Although Li Qingyuan has been trying to avoid trouble, but since the other party has sent it to the door, it seems too fake to refuse. 3,000 words description omitted. Mr. Li, where is Ruth? Didn't she say to invite you to the dinner party? An hour later, when Carl saw Li Qingyuan in the banquet hall, he suddenly asked in confusion. Carl was very uneasy about the performance of his fiancée, but after a few days of understanding, he felt that the man opposite Mr. Li was a real gentleman, and Ruth was with him, and he was very relieved. Besides, the other party has signed an initial investment plan with the Hockley Group on behalf of Prince Qing, and the first investment is £150,000. With the help of such a large sum of money, even if Carl knew that Ruth would be taken advantage of by the other party, he felt innocuous. Anyway, as long as you don't break the bottom line, right? Chapter 14. Miss Ruth said she was a little tired. Go back to rest first. Didn't you see her? As the so-called lie comes, as a social person who has been in the society for more than 10 years, he will not tell falsehood. What's the matter? It is true that Ruth is sleeping now, but it is better not to delve into the question of where she is sleeping and why she is sleeping. Then I'll go back and have a look. Carl didn't know the twists and turns inside, and didn't ask carefully after hearing that his fiancée was tired. Lee, I will be in New York the day after tomorrow. When will the investment you mentioned arrive? Carl began to ask about other things after hearing Ruth's departure. By the way, other people also came over with their wine glasses. There is no way. The tiger's skin is too much, and it is not so simple to want to lie. Fortunately, Li Qingyuan knew that he would never need to meet these people again, so he chatted with them in an indifferent manner. The more confident he is, the more people will find him unpredictable. The atmosphere of the whole dinner is very harmonious, and there is no difference. Until, buzzing, everyone only saw the chandeliers overhead and the wine glasses on the table buzzing, and the whole ship seemed to shake violently. How is this going? Li Qingyuan held the table with one hand and asked the people around him. I don't know, it should be a storm, Carl replied while wiping the wine stains on his body. He was holding a wine glass just now and was preparing to drink, but the ship swayed and the glass of wine was spilled directly. Don't worry, everyone, the Titanic is absolutely tolerable. It is the safest ship in the world. It was just a chance encounter with wind and waves, and it is all right. In less than a moment someone stood up and told everyone that it was a false alarm. Field. Everyone in the banquet hall immediately calmed down and continued to sing and dance. But well, Li Qingyuan retired from the banquet hall under the pretext of being too strong to drink, and then returned to his cabin. Ruth was still lying limply on the bed, and the little girl ran to tease him unconsciously and didn't want to think about who was the hunter and who was the prey.
Flap.
2 slaps to wake Ruth, the silly white sweet chick whispered in a daze. No way, you let me rest, I really can't do it. Get up, the ship is sinking. It is reasonable to say that he shouldn't care about each other's life and death, but after all, the two have just had the closest contact. Li Qingyuan felt that he should also pull each other out. The current Titan Nick does not continue to persist on the sea for more than 2 hours like the original book, because in order to prevent his own craftsmanship from not sinking, he worked overtime to break all the floors of the 8 airtight cabins. By the way, he also broke the central keel and the load-bearing wall to pieces. Anyway, if he is idle, he is also idle. If he knocks more, the insurance rate is higher, isn't it? The explosion happened just now because he stuffed all the yellow explosives made these days into the coal pile. Titan Nick, as a steamship, consumes huge amounts of coal every day. Thousands of tons of coal are stuffed with dozens of caddies of explosives, and even the gods can't find it. Those boiler workers have been dizzy due to the perennial harsh working environment. Even if someone finds that the coal shoveled out may be somewhat abnormal, there will never be anyone who will carefully observe what is going on. No matter what it is, isn't it just burned to ashes when thrown into the boiler? So when the explosives are thrown into the boiler, there is no need to explain in detail what is left to happen. The boiler room exploded in an instant. The boiler that was originally at the critical point would explode once it exploded, which directly exploded the boiler room into a ball of twists. Originally, if only the boiler room exploded, it would not be a fatal effect for such a behemoth. At best, the ship would not be able to move anymore. However, when the surrounding airtight cabin floors were shattered by the aftermath of the explosion, then the fate of the ship was immediately doomed. Even if Li Qingyuan didn't know much architecture or proficient in mathematics, he knew that this ship could survive for hours at sea. Maybe the bottom compartment has been filled with water now. What? The ship is sinking? How could it be possible? Ruth got up sleepily, thinking that the other party was joking. This is the Titan Nick, known as the unsinkable Titan. It is the highest masterpiece of the British Empire. How can it sink? This year, British manufacturing represents the world's #1. Not to mention that this ship is still the face of the British Empire. So even if Ruth is very obsessed with the man in front of him, she still firmly believes in the credibility of her country on this issue. Get up. There is no time and no interest in arguing with each other. Li Qingyuan has always felt that those people who are still reasonable with women when they are in a crisis are simply mentally ill. He slapped Ruth directly and told the other party to hurry up. Suit up. Ruth was stunned by the 2 slaps, but even if she was quite dissatisfied, she still dressed her clothes obediently. The 2 walked quickly to the deck. At the moment, except for a few staff members, there was no figure on the deck. It can be seen that the control of public opinion is very important wherever it is. Up to now, apart from Li Qingyuan on the entire ship, it is estimated that what happened to the captain and several senior officials. You stay here, I'll get something, and when the lifeboat will be released, you will immediately follow and leave. I will come on the next boat. Holding Ruth's hand, Li Qingyuan told her road. Seriously, if he hadn't left because of the completion of the task, he really wanted to stay in this world for 2 more days. Qingyuan, I'll wait for you. Although she didn't know what happened, Ruth felt that if she let go now, she would never see this man again. Be obedient. We Oriental men don't like disobedient women. Seriously patted Ruth's palm. Li Qingyuan knew that this stupid girl was attendant. If she didn't tell her clearly, God knows whether she will be with the boat. Sank. At any rate, it can be regarded as one's own spoils in this world. If he died like this, he would be sad for a while. Probably a few minutes. Fortunately, this guy Carl also ran out of the banquet hall at this time and just hit 2 of them. Originally, Carl was still attending the banquet, but when he found out that his wife and Li Qingyuan were gone, he felt a little bad and rushed out of it. Carl, you came just right. Seeing this suffering master, Li Qingyuan felt that he should be able to entrust Ruth to him. No matter how you say it, this is the real fiancé. Well, at least Ruth is following him. It is much better than following Jack that scumbag. As for whether Carl would go bankrupt and commit suicide like the original book, I have told him so many later economic development laws in the past 2 days. If he insists on going all the way to death, he can't stop him, right? Chapter 15. The final reward is being settled. When Li Qingyuan sat on the highest peak of the ship and looked at the floating painting below, the system's unfeeling voice suddenly rang from his ears. At present, Most of the Titan Nix hull has sunk below the water surface. It is estimated that this ship will be a wreck in the icy Atlantic Ocean, following the trajectory in history. Now the deck has become a mess, and everyone is jumping on the lifeboat one after another. The inferiority of human beings has reached its culmination at this moment. In the original plot, a bunch of people went to justice without fear in the face of death. That is basically the result of the beautification of the film. It is true that people like the captain and the chief designer are indeed ready to coexist and die with the ship, but others can join forces. Don't think so. Ants can still survive, let alone people. Looking at the crowds who were crying and screaming, Li Qingyuan silently poured the red wine in his hand, even if it is practiced for them. Anyway, Ruth and Carl had already made the first lifeboat and escaped because of his reminder, and he couldn't control the others. After all, everyone is not very familiar, right? The main task, sinking the Titan Nick, has been completed, with a completion rate of 85%. The evaluation is excellent, and 3 free attribute points are awarded. Hidden side mission. Have close contact with the heroine Ruth DeWitt Booker and get the title reward. A newcomer task reward skill is being drawn now. Hearing the hidden rewards of the system, Li Qingyuan was startled. Actually, this can also get rewards? This system does not seem to be very serious. The completion of the newcomer's mission is excellent. Now the elementary level bomb proficiency is freely upgraded to a blaster. The mission has been completed. Will the host return immediately? Can I continue to stay in this world? Li Qingyuan asked suspiciously. He originally thought that he would return immediately after completing the task, but who knew he could continue to stay in this world? I had known that I should have gone with Ruth just now, but he developed 2 poses. So many tricks have not been made in time. The host can continue to stay in this world for 2 hours, and will be forced to return after 2 hours. Well, 2 hours can't do anything at all. Besides, this broken ship will sink in a few minutes at most, and there is no need to stay here. Return. Grabbing the picture frame and bronzeware in his hand, and chanting these 2 words silently in his heart, Li Qingyuan instantly returned from the top of the ship to his room in Sokovia. Looking at the alarm clock hanging on the wall, the time still stays at the moment before the journey. It seems that crossing to other plot worlds to do tasks will not have any impact on the time in reality. Looking at the picture frame in his left hand, as expected, the painting in his hand was taken out. It's just that the bronzeware he held in his right hand was not brought back, probably because he did not have enough strength to calculate it. In addition to making explosives and condensate on the ship these days, he also collected some valuable things, by the way. It's like the picture frame that I just brought back. This is the original Picasso that I got from Ruth. The same goes for that bronzeware, which was bought from an unknown rich man, but it was a pity that the thing was too heavy to be sent back together, otherwise it would definitely sell for a good price. Thinking of this, Li Qingyuan took out his pocket easily. Heart of the Ocean. This precious dark blue gem in the original plot just appeared in his palm, and he picked it off just now while Ruth was sleeping in his room. The conscience of heaven and earth at the time, he just thought that this thing was considered an important plot item at any rate, and it should be able to trigger rewards. He had absolutely no other ideas. After all, in various legends, this gem is known as a cursed stone and possesses strange magical powers. But now it seems that this thing is just a beautiful gem, nothing special at all. Forget it, save it as a souvenir. After he took out all the miscellaneous things in his pocket and put them away, he began to count the rewards for this mission. The 3 points of free attribute points are natural. Needless to say, anyone who has read the novels of Infinite Stream will know how to use it. However, considering that he currently doesn't know how to add points, he decided to keep it and talk about it later. The remaining 2 rewards are 1 title and 1 skill. Name, Li Qingyuan. Race, male terrestrial. Strength, 4, 5 agility, 5, 5 physique, 5, 5 spirit, 8, 5 title, Laoli Next Door. Skills, demolition ghosts. Laoli Next Door. When you assemble this title to interact with married women, there is a certain chance to trigger the passive enhancement effect of this title. Seeing the system's comment on this title, Li Qingyuan almost vomited a mouthful of old blood. This damn system is absolutely poisonous. It is simply Chi Guogua's slander to give such a decent person to such an absurd and absolute title. Besides, in the Titanic, I was passive throughout the whole journey. Well, I am definitely a victim. Brother Jack, are you still there? Just as he was about to call the customer service to complain, he heard Pietro's panic shout from above. What's the matter with these 2 kids? Li Qingyuan climbed up the big hole in the middle of the floor in 3 steps and 2 steps, only to see 2 children shuddering in the corner. What's wrong? He asked a little strangely. It stands to reason that the psychological qualities of the Scarlet brothers and sisters are much higher than those of ordinary children, so they shouldn't be frightened like this without seeing themselves for 2 minutes. Dee. However, the noise coming from behind immediately answered his doubts and saw that the missile actually started to flash red. Depend on. Li Qingyuan suddenly cursed. This damn plot is not right at all. Didn't it mean that the missile didn't explode after being placed here for 2 days? Why doesn't it seem a bit bad now? He quickly took 2 steps forward to take Wanda brothers and sisters for a run, but just raised his foot. He turned around and turned back. At the moment when he saw the missile, the structural design of the missile suddenly appeared in his mind. Blasting Ghost. You are familiar with most explosives. You can make bombs in the eyes of ordinary people, and you can make them explode in a way that ordinary people can't understand. The missile manufactured by Stark Group can definitely be regarded as a high-tech product. With his current skill level, if he directly confronts Iron Man, he will definitely be abused, but the thing in front of him is just a military product manufactured by Tony Stark 10 years ago. There is not much technological content at all, so in just an instant, Li Qingyuan made a decision. Chapter 16. What is he doing? Wanda looked at Li Qingyuan, who was crouching in front of the missile, and asked his brother softly. The two of them are already 10 years old. 10 years old may be an innocent age for the flowers growing in the greenhouse, but for children living in the small troubled Eastern European country of Sokovia, 10 years old is already considered to be an innocent age. Half an adult. Especially the 2 brothers and sisters who have just experienced the tragic death of their parents, their psychology has accelerated to mature. He seems to be dismantling the missile, Pietro said uncertainly. As a lawless bear kid, Pietro often likes to disassemble some things by hand, but generally only limited to alarm clocks and missiles. He absolutely dare not touch it indiscriminately. After all, he is just a bit naughty, not to die. It will explode. Wanda's 2 big eyes were filled with tears, and she didn't want to be blown to death in a daze. Why don't we both run first? Pietro suggested unscrupulously. The 2 of them and Li Qingyuan can only be regarded as nodding acquaintances, and the relationship between their parents can only be regarded as normal. Since the other party wants to die, it is naturally impossible for the 2 of them to stay and die with each other. But we can't get out. Wanda pointed to Li Qingyuan, who was crouching in front of the missile and didn't know what to do, and then pointed to the gate that was blown up. The door has been completely buried in the ruins. As for jumping the window, do you think 2 10-year-olds can survive by jumping off the 3rd floor? Not to mention that guns are still firing outside, and I don't know what the situation is. We can jump to the 2nd floor first and find a corner to hide, Pietro said, pointing to the big hole in the middle of the living room. The power of this kind of small missile is actually not great. If it is estimated that the lethality is about 20 meters in the open area, the power in this kind of building is even more compressed to individual floors. The first missile exploded in the living room on the 2nd floor just now, and the siblings on the 3rd floor were both unharmed. Although the protagonist had a halo bonus, the missile's power was indeed not good, and that was the most important reason. After all, the missile manufactured by the Stark Group is used to destroy the target in the center of the city, so it is necessary to ensure that the power is compressed to an acceptable range. Otherwise, the entire city will be turned into ruins after a battle. What is the point of being occupied? 2nd floor? Wanda's eyes were a little confused. Only then did she think that her parents seemed to be lying on the 2nd floor now. Pietro, Mom and Dad. Thinking of this, Wanda couldn't help but cried. Don't cry, Wanda. Pietro became anxious when he saw his sister started crying again. God knows what the Jackma is doing. If his sister's crying affects his movements, they will explain here. But when faced with the crying sister of Yua and Rain, Pietro seemed a little at a loss. What's the matter? Li Qingyuan stood up and walked to Wanda and asked, Did you fix the missile? Pietro raised his head in surprise, only to see that the flashing missile had lost its luster, and the front section was open to reveal a bunch of mechanical components that he couldn't understand at all. What is it? I broke it. Now this thing will not explode even if you throw it down. Li Qingyuan casually played with 2 small parts. Worthy of the missile produced by Iron Man quality is guaranteed. If he had such a ready-made material in the last plot world, it wouldn't be too easy to complete the task. But if there is no skill that the system gives away, even if the missile is placed in front of you, you can't figure it out. Brother Jack, would you actually dismantle missiles? Pietro looked at Li Qingyuan with staring eyes, his small eyes full of admiration. In the hearts of boys, those who can shoot guns are masters, and those who can dismantle missiles are even more peerless masters. For a moment, Pietro even forgot the fact that his parents had just lost their lives, and his eyes glowed and started to circle around the dismantled missile. Brother Jack, will it really not explode if I touch it now? Pietro wanted to reach out and touch the war weapon, but he was a little worried. It's okay. Even if you throw it on the fire and bake it, it's okay. Li Qingyuan waved his hand casually. The instruments now are so precise that the missile is more than 1 meter long. But in fact, the real explosive composition is not 100%. 1. The Stark group is indeed a profiteer. Woo-oh. Wanda is still sobbing constantly. Girls are always more sensitive than boys. She is still immersed in the sadness of losing her parents. Wanda, don't cry. Brother will give you candy. Seriously, facing a crying little Loli, Li Qingyuan didn't know what to do. So he took out a lollipop from his pocket and faced it. She coaxed. Woo-woo-woo-woo. As a result, Wanda cried louder. I said you don't cry, okay? If it is Pietro who dares to be so annoying. Li Qingyuan promises that he has fisted down and taught him how to behave well, but it is Wanda who is crying in front of him, which really makes him caught blind. Can't catch Wanda for a fight. Brother Jack, you can't eat the mint-flavored lollipop Wanda you took? Pietro jumped out from nowhere at this time, took the lollipop in Li Qingyuan's hand directly and quickly took it apart. The wrapping paper was stuffed into his mouth. Pietro. Wanda glared at Pietro after crying, and it seemed that his mood had recovered a lot. What about this? Banana flavor. Fortunately, he grabbed a handful of candies before coming up, and Li Qingyuan quickly took out a lollipop and asked, Woo! Sucking woo. Wanda cried and licked a lollipop, making it hard to understand how she did these two things at the same time. Fortunately, the sound of her crying was finally reduced. You two should rest in the room first. Let's squeeze it tonight. Listening to the roaring gunshots outside, I don't know if I can finish the game tonight. Now the whole city is not safe. Hiding in the room is the best choice. Both Wanda and Pietro nodded silently. Both children grew up a lot in an instant. If there are guys who are full of love and the heart of Our Lady, they will definitely feel sorry for the two 10-year-old children who are as sensible as adults, but for the heartless Li Qingyuan. If these two guys really keep crying, he kept thinking about whether he should leave them alone. It is true that the Scarlet Witch in the future is very good and great, but it will not be a few years later. In order for a potential stock to catch up with the good life of oneself, it is really hard to say whether this business is profit or loss. Chapter 17. After some tossing, Wanda and Piero finally fell asleep. After experiencing so many things in just one day, even adults will be exhausted physically and mentally, let alone their two children. So even if there were gunshots from time to time outside, the two of them still went straight into their dreams. Looking at the two siblings lying next to him, one on the left and the other on the right, Li Qingyuan was a little embarrassed. He came back from a full sleep on the Titan Nick just now, so he can't sleep at all now. Besides, Wanda and the others have experienced a war and bereavement, but they have experienced Travel Plus System Plus Infinite Plus Marvel and so on. If they can still fall asleep, his heart will be too great. Ines. Opening his eyes wide and leaning against the head of the bed, he began to think about what to do next. The broken place in Sokovia definitely can't stay any longer. According to memory, it seems that local wars break out in this place on average 3 or 4 times a year. I don't know how the cheap parents of this body adapt to it. Besides, according to the plot, it seems that there is a castle left over from the last century around the city. The owner of the castle is Hydra Snakehead Baron Strucker. In the Marvel movie, Baron Strucker only played 2 shots before he died. Ultron, who he regarded as his trump card, was killed in the cell, which was a deadly super useless. If you are not interested in the history of Marvel, you probably don't have any impression of this bald head who just showed up and immediately received the lunch. But in fact, Baron Strucker is an authentic Hydra veteran. I think he was the right and left hand of Red Skull during World War II. After the war, he took over a lot of Red Skull's strategic legacy. Not weaker than S.H.I.E.L.D. You should know that when Avengers 2 started, all the strength of Avengers was assembled to destroy Baron Strucker's castle, and it was because the opponent actually wanted to use a strategy to break Avengers and set a trap deliberately. It's a pity that Baron Strucker counted to the beginning but not to the end. Avengers was indeed disintegrated later due to ideas and other reasons, but he was killed directly in prison by the crazy mechanical life Ultron, and he was extremely aggrieved. In the original book, Baron Strucker has been working hard to develop the super ability of human beings, and Wanda and Pietro are the successful experimenters of each other. Some people may say that they have to give up if they want to have power, but Li Qingyuan doesn't think so. My own little Wanda is so cute. So why bother to do those human experiments that might be life-threatening? If it's Pietro, you might consider throwing it away. Gossip away. Originally, if there was no system, Li Qingyuan was considering taking Wanda brothers and sisters to a country that cannot be said to live in seclusion. Anyway, it is said that the country cannot be said to have the protection of the river crab god. Regardless of whether it is Thanos' finger or the explosion of the universe, a country can stand unscathed. Not even a trace of spray can be turned over. But now that you have the system, if you still want to continue, let alone your inner disagreement, the readers who want to come will also disagree. After finally crossing into a new world and having a gold finger system like this, I have to make a career. After researching, he found that the system he carried seemed to be able to trigger tasks by contacting the plot characters in the original book. His first task was opened because of contact with Wanda. As for why Pietro, who he contacted first, did not trigger the task, either this system is not 100% triggered, or the kid Pietro has a bad reputation at all, and even the system doesn't think he is a key figure in the Marvel Universe. After all, compared to Scarlet Witch's impressive reputation, and a mere Quicksilver, who remembers. Definitely, it may also be because this system favors women over men. However, these are just speculations. To master the rules, it is estimated that many trials will be required. And based on the fact that the first time he opened the system was Godzilla 2, King of Monsters, the world opened by this system should be related to the quest characters he came into contact with. The ancient alien beasts in Godzilla 2, King of Monsters, can indeed destroy the world. Even the Red Lotus Godzilla can use nuclear bombs as seeds and replace them with superheroes like Captain America and Black Widow. It's definitely a food delivery, but if it's Scarlet Witch in perfect condition, then it's really hard to say who abuses who. So on the premise of ensuring his own safety, the superhero he should contact next must definitely be carefully considered. The first world is specially adjusted for him because of the newcomer's plot system. God knows if there is any such preferential treatment in the second one. If he ran to meet Marvel's Iron Man recklessly now, the Ghost knew what plot he would be thrown into by the system. If it were in the world of War of the Gods, it is estimated that he would be killed by a sneeze by the small soldier halfway through. Before you can get your own strength, let's avoid the A** guy and go. But although Iron Man cannot be touched now, other heroes or villains can still be touched. For example, Black Widow, or War Machine or Falcon, who are not so powerful, can only dominate among ordinary people. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but start to figure out the next steps. When the situation is a little stable after the fight tomorrow, he will take Wanda brothers and sisters to run away. He doesn't want to wait for a minute when this breaks the country. The predecessor parents left a lot of inheritance, and should be enough to go to New York by themselves. Brother Wanda shouldn't be a problem. The two children are unaccompanied. If they don't want to follow them, they can only go to the orphanage. If they want to come, they won't be so mentally retarded. Although the place in New York is a place of chaos, it is only that kind of place that allows one to quickly get in touch with various plot characters so as to rapidly increase his strength. Counting it is now the end of 2006. Next year that stinky guy will become Iron Man, and then the Earth will enter the era of great transcendence. In New York, at any rate, he can keep up with the development of the plot and use the advantage of the profit to mix it with system rewards. Although the crisis is a bit bigger, unless he can hide in a certain country that cannot be said, otherwise it is dangerous anywhere on the Earth. Only the tip of the iceberg is shown in the movie, and the hidden crises in other places are not necessarily smaller than in New York. This is Marvel's world after all. God knows if you were eating well at home, if you were suddenly crushed to death by a big green *** from the sky. Don't leave me. Wanda hugged his arm tightly and muttered to himself. It's probably a nightmare. This kid gently patted Wanda's shoulder. Li Qingyuan exclaimed in her heart. Sure enough, he is the great Scarlet Witch. At only 10 years old, he is comparable to those 17 or 18 years old in China, and I don't know how he grew up. Chapter 18 Sokovia. The war was over in the early hours of the morning. The situation in this broken place in Sokovia is somewhat similar to the Republic of China. There are 5 warlords in the big-handed country, and these 5 guys have to fight several times a year. The warlord who finally captured the capital will proclaim himself the president. Although the longest term of this president is only 1 year, he is a president anyway. According to the Marvel Comics world setting, Sokovia should be Lord Dom, the site of Dr. Destruction, but Li Qingyuan carefully searched in his memory and found that his predecessor had never heard of this name. Think about it again. When Marvel was destitute, it seemed to sell a lot of the copyrights of superhero and supervillain, which led to a big difference between Marvel movie universe and comics. So I want to come to Dumu, and the Fantastic Four should be directly given by this world. Get rid of. Similarly, The mutant group disappeared into the world, and only the funny alien race should be left. What a pity. He is still very interested in invisible women and mystique. It really doesn't work. So can Polaris. Fortunately, there is a Wanda next to him, which can ease the pain in his heart a little bit. Although this Wanda is still in a state that can only be viewed from a distance and cannot be played, but to develop Scarlet Witch, it sounds like a very big thing. The three woke up the next morning. Both Wanda and Pietro thanked him. The two children also knew that if it weren't for Jack's brother, who didn't deal very much with each other, to save them, maybe they would be bombed yesterday. Meet Sauce too. It is also possible that he ran out and was shot to death by random guns. The victorious troops began to take over the city, and the rescue team methodically maintained the damaged buildings and rescued the wounded. After decades of warlord melee, Sokovia formed a one-stop post-war treatment plan. Although chaotic here, there is a chaotic order. Basically, no matter who occupied the capital, there will be no destructive plunder. On the contrary, the situation will be stabilized during this period to ensure the personal and property safety of residents. Because everyone is fighting for the economic and political status of the capital. If the capital is smashed into nothing, it would be a smashing deal for everyone, and no one would dare to risk angering the other four companies. This kind of solidity and fishing. Yesterday's predecessor and Wanda's parents were killed by the missile. The real reason was that they were accidentally injured. No way, thousands of unlucky people die in the melee every year, but relative to the millions of people in Sokovia, the people who died in the melee have not yet died in car accidents. If this kind of thing didn't happen to yourself, no one would care too much. The rescue team cleaned up all the rubbish in the corridor, and by the way, took out the parents of both parties. Brother Wanda cried again after seeing the mosaics. Li Qingyuan had no reaction at all. After all, he was not familiar with the two dead people. But don't know why, when he saw the two mosaics packed into the box, his heart could not help but twitch. Although he directly replaced the original body with his soul, but the feeling of blood engraved in his bones still made him a little unable to restrain it. The team in charge of the rescue packed the four bodies in a box and took them for cremation. Li Qingyuan took the Wanda brothers and sisters to watch the whole process in silence, and then buried the ashes they received in the cemetery. Everyone knows that the setting of carrying the ashes of their parents around without a dog's blood is unrealistic at all. Originally, the troops responsible for the maintenance were planning to send the two children to the orphanage after learning that the parents of Wanda brothers and sisters were dead, but this proposal was directly rejected by Li Qingyuan. He knew that the orphanage in Sokovia was actually Baron Strucker's laboratory, and the other party used those orphans to conduct human experiments for many years. In a chaotic country like Sokovia, normal people must carefully consider their own tomorrow, and naturally no one will pay attention to those orphans. Wanda gripped Li Qingyuan's clothes tightly. Although she didn't look like a 10-year-old child in crimson development, where was her height? Standing next to Li Qingyuan, who is 1.5 meters and 4 meters, looked so petite and pitiful. She and Pietro are really afraid that Li Qingyuan will hand them over. After all, the name of the orphanage doesn't sound like a good place. Anyway, as long as you are a normal child, you won't like it if you want to. Jack, I can understand your feelings, but have you considered whether it is very difficult for you to take these two children by yourself? The aunt of the district lawyer in charge of registration said to Li Qingyuan earnestly. Everyone is an old neighbor for more than 10 years. Although they are of different races, the creatures like ants are the same no matter which race they are placed in. Aunt Madeline, I know what I'm doing. A place like an orphanage. If they are sent to them in this life, it will be ruined. Li Qingyuan, who accepted the original memory, began to talk to the black ant in front of him. It seems that the other party always wanted to sell his daughter to the original in his memory. Looking at the dark and bloated ant in front of him, Li Qingyuan shuddered suddenly. Who can afford this? There is one more reason to flee Sokovia as soon as possible. The old couples are good people. How could they be so unlucky? The black ant talked about it for a long time, all in memory of the benefits of her former parents, and took the opportunity to ask Li Qingyuan if she wanted her daughter to help. It must be now Li Qingyuan can be regarded as an authentic parent with a family of millions of dollars, and he is also considered to be a good-looking person, and he is definitely a super king in 5. If you say that someone just died of both parents, is it a bit too much to sell your daughter to the door? Isn't this to quickly let my daughter come to help them inherit the family from the Wang family so that they can continue the incense? As the old neighborhood of her original parents, Madeline learned a lot of Chinese customs. As for Li Qingyuan is only 18 this year, and her daughter is only 16? Where does Sokovia pay attention to that kind of thing, let alone 16? Even if it is 14, there are not a few people who get married. It was hard to send Aunt Madeline, who took the opportunity to sell her daughter, Li Qingyun felt that coping with her was even more tiring than doing the task on the Titan Nick. Brother Jack. When the rescue team and Aunt Madeline were sent out, the day passed. Pietro and Wanda stood before him and shouted timidly. The two children looked at him nervously, not knowing how they should live in the future. The two of them have no blood relationship with each other at all, and the other party's willingness to take them in is already considered as affectionate, let alone save their lives. The Maximovs are standard Western thoughts, and the savings on hand are probably not enough to cover the funeral expenses just now. It can be said that the two children are absolutely penniless now, let alone continue to study. If Li Qingyun ignores them now, I am afraid that tomorrow's food will be a problem. By the way, the two of them now live in assets under the name of Li Qingyun. Chapter 19. Pietro, Wanda. Are you two ready? Li Qingyun sat on the sofa in the living room and asked the Wanda brother and sister in front of him. Almost half a month has passed since the last missile attack, and the two brothers and sisters have slowly come out of the pain of losing their parents. After all, the two of them now are much luckier than in the original book, and they have neither experienced the death torment of 2 days and nights, nor the physical and mental injuries that followed. In places like orphanages, even in developed countries, there are countless shady scenes, let alone a chaotic country like Sokovia. Being bullied and humiliated is absolutely commonplace, and it is necessary to endure all kinds of bullying incidents that may occur at all times and the danger of being pulled by Baron Trasco for experimentation at any time. Brother Jack, are we really leaving here? Wanda asked timidly. Call me Brother Qingyun. I have changed my name. Li Qingyun reminded him by tapping the armrest of the sofa with his palm. He was very busy during this period of time. He first received all the inheritance of his original parents, and then found a buyer to sell all the real estate. He also took the opportunity to change his name, by the way. The name Jack Ma always reminds him of a certain pirate king. So while he was busy transferring property, he also changed his name, by the way. Anyway, it is a matter of spending a few $100s more. For him, who has inherited an inheritance of nearly $1 million, can that little money be considered money? Besides, there is still an authentic Picasso hidden in his safe. I don't dare to say that there are too many things. You have to start with an 8-figure number if you throw it to the auction. I'm sorry, Qingyun brother. Wanda quickly apologized. She knew that now she and her brother both depend on each other's charity to continue their lives, so the brothers and sisters are absolutely at a disadvantage when facing him. It's okay, just pay attention next time. Li Qingyun smiled kindly, and then rubbed his little blushing face. Don't say it. It feels really comfortable to rub. Sokovia is a place with constant wars. It's not a good place at all. Besides, our parents are killed here. It's not easy to avoid. I think it's better for us to live in a different city. Although he could not discuss directly with the two brothers and sisters, take them away, but Li Qingyun thinks it is better to make it clear. Even though these two guys are only 10 years old, they are actually no less than adults. The kid Pietro looked at himself like a thief at night every day. It was really disappointing. How can a decent person like himself do something that is not as good as a beast? Anyway, I have to raise it for a few more years. But if we leave, can we come back again? Pietro asked weakly, raising his hand. In the first few days, he thought that Jack's brother might have some bad thoughts about his sister, so after finishing the funeral of his parents, he has been vigilantly guarding against each other. It cannot be said that he is too precocious, because such things are not uncommon in Sokovia, and it is not surprising that anything appears in this chaotic land. Li Qingyun and the two of them were not close to each other, but not only saved his siblings but also willing to adopt him, by the way, which made Pietro feel a little bit confused when he was moved, what the other party wanted to be. So when Pietro saw that the other party often likes to ravage Wanda's head and face, he immediately felt that he had discovered the other party's true intentions. In those few days, he was frightened. Not only was he afraid that the other party would do anything bad to his sister, but at the same time, he was afraid that his guess was wrong and the other party would be furious and drove out his brother and sister. It is definitely not an easy task for two 10-year-old children to seek a living in a place like Sokovia. As a result, after a week of continuous fear, Pietro realized that he seemed to be saving the abdomen of a gentleman with a villain. Brother Jack really likes Wanda, but it's a very pure like, and it's definitely not as unsightly as he thought. Definitely yes, but only after the situation in Sokovia stabilizes. Li Qingyun nodded. If it weren't for the warlord's melee, the environment in Sokovia is actually pretty good, even if it's a vacation. Where are we going to move? Seeing that Li Qingyun was not angry because of his actions a few days ago, Pietro asked boldly. New York, The world's largest metropolis. You should have seen it on TV. Li Qingyuan patted the New York Geographic Guide on the coffee table and said, "We are going to New York?" The eyes of the two children suddenly jumped up. It was the first time that they were so excited in the past 2 months. For children, they don't have too many thoughts. The two of them know that New York is the largest city in the world. Whether it is in books or on TV, they all describe it as a heavenly beauty. The two of them, who were still a little worried, were immediately washed away by the joy of going to the metropolis. The two guys quickly packed their belongings and followed Li Qingyuan to the beach by car. Sokovia is very strict about the exit of its residents due to years of melee. After all, if the control is not strict, all the wealthy people in the country may run away. Just like the original parents, if they could leave the country by legal means, they must have taken their predecessors to other places long ago. Fortunately, no matter how strict the control is, there are loopholes to be found, and the chaotic country like Sokovia is naturally no exception. Li Qingyuan had contacted Snakehead a long time ago and planned to smuggle out with Sister Wanda. "Just the three of you?" The Snakehead driving the ferry boat saw the three children appearing in front of him and asked dizzily. Li Qingyuan talked with him over the phone because Sokovia's network is not very developed, so everyone usually chooses to communicate by phone. "Yes, just the three of us." Li Qingyuan knows what the other party is thinking. There is absolutely no good person doing this kind of ferry boat business. People get rid of it. But he doesn't care about this kind of thing at all. Do you really think he has been idle for half a month? If there are only 3 people, then you have to add money. The boss of the ship said with a fierce look. Wanda trembles with Li Qingyuan's hand, and the few people on the ferry boat seem to belong to the villain of that kind of horror movie, the kind that can definitely be used to scare children. As for Pietro, his legs are shaking now, like sifting chaff. He wanted to squeeze close to Li Qingyuan like Wanda, but it was a pity that Li Qingyuan didn't let him have that opportunity at all. Just forget Wanda squeezing in. You just add to the fun. Chapter 20. 100,000 yuan including this car. Now set off immediately, pay 30,000 first, and then I will give you the rest. Li Qingyuan didn't have the slightest surprise at the starting price of the boat boss, and said straightforwardly, "These underworld businesses have never had good people. It would be a strange thing if they don't sit down and raise the price." The boss of the ship looked at them carefully, looked at each other with a few of his men, and then nodded. "Brother Ching, these people look so scary." It wasn't until the 3 of them entered the cabin below the deck that Pietro dared to speak. "You and Wanda stay here well, and don't move. Don't go out at night no matter what happens." Li Qingyuan calmly patted Wanda's head and said, "Is there any danger?" Wanda raised her head timidly, tears flickering in her 2 big eyes. Although she knew she shouldn't cry at this time, she didn't know why she couldn't help her tears. "No, just in case." Playing with the clay in his hands, Li Qingyuan's eyes slowly revealed a cold light. "I hope these people don't want to die by themselves." He just wanted to leave this broken place safely, but didn't want to make any news on the way. "Head, when shall we start?" Above the deck, the sailor's part-time Snakehead asked the boss of the ship. Doing business on the sea, especially their underworld business, is not a good person. The boss of the boat did not speak. He has been in business for so long, and he naturally knows who can provoke and who cannot. Li Qingyuan's composure and sophistication just now made him a little unpredictable, wondering if the other party has any support. "Let's tie up those 3 directly, and after the money is found, we will kill the Chinese. The remaining 2 children can be brought to Lohas first, and then sold to make movies. With the qualifications of those 2 children, they can sell for 100,000. The captain began to calculate a bright future. You can earn 200,000 yuan in one business trip, and you can get 20,000 yuan if you divide it up by yourself. If you can meet this 3 times a year, then a proper annual income is 100,000 yuan. Wait until the middle of the work." The boss of the ship, who was agitated by his subordinates, carefully calculated in his heart, feeling that he definitely did not sleep well last night and caused some mental disorders. Where can there be so many pretending to be pigs and tigers in this world? The boy looks like an ordinary guy, although he can see that the other party has a gun on his waist with his eyesight. What does it matter? How many people on their ship who did not have a gun? 6 guns versus 1 gun. Whoever wins and who loses still need to talk about it. Not to mention that all of them are veterans of murder, and how can they be afraid that the other party is a young man? I'll add some food when I'll send them dinner. It's best if I don't do it. But as a veteran who has run the waterline for more than 10 years, the boat boss finally ordered. "Understood, boss." The sailor nodded excitedly and left. He had new toys to play in the evening, so he was naturally very excited. "Hey!" Looking at the food in front of him, Li Qingyuan sighed slightly. It seems we still have to do it. Pietro reached for the milk, only to retract his hand when he touched the cup. No way, it hurts. He covered his hands and looked at Li Qingyuan with a grieved face, not knowing why the other party beat him. Ignoring Pietro's aggrieved little eyes, Li Qingyuan hugged Wanda back. The two children stayed in the cabin for an afternoon. Now they were agitated when they saw the hot milk. Wanda, just like Pietro, rushed forward to drink. However, she was picked up by Li Qingyuan without getting close to the table. It was precisely because it was not easy to hold Wanda to stop her, so Li Qingyuan directly slammed Pietro's back with the bamboo board in her hand. You dare to beware of yourself for a while before you are wary, you don't know what to say. These things can't be eaten. It seems that they want to go to the dark one by one. Although they have not acquired skills such as toxin proficiency, but with the soles of the feet, you can know that hot milk is definitely a luxury item. Food, if there are no other attempts, how can it be sent to them? Milk is poisonous? Both Pietro and Wanda's eyes widened. Although they were more sensible than ordinary children, the adult world was so sinister that they had never expected. I'll go out and have a look. You two have the doors locked. Unless I call the door, I don't care who comes in and shoot. He took off Beretta from his waist. It was originally intended to be given to Wanda, but thought about it. He thought he passed it to Pietro's hand. Insurance is here. You can shoot by pressing it first. Wanda will rely on you to protect it, understand? Li Qingyuan said to Pietro with a rare and pleasant face. Understand. I will protect my sister. Pietro nodded excitedly, finally enjoying the treatment of an adult. Remember, unless it's me calling out, I don't care who opens the door and shoot directly at the door. Although giving the gun to a 10-year-old child seems a bit tricky, there is really no better way at the moment. Instead of waiting for those guys to rush down, it's better to go up and get all this done by yourself. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that he didn't know how to sail and didn't know the route, he would have killed all this group of people a long time ago, and that would have caused the current situation. You must come back. Li Qingyuan stepped forward to push the door, only to see Wanda gripping the corner of his clothes tightly and whispering, Don't worry, I'll be fine. After rubbing Wanda's little cheek, he happily opened the door and walked out. The space for the ferry boat is very small, and the cabin door is open 2 steps to go directly on the deck. The sailors who were squatting on the deck and smoking were a little surprised when they saw him climbing up from below. They were waiting here for a while to go to live amusement. Why did the other party climb out by themselves? Everyone is here. Seeing several sailors on the boat and the old master book all together, Li Qingyuan shrugged helplessly. I am really a crow's mouth, what is said. If their expression says there are no ghosts, then they really don't believe in ghosts. Several sailors all looked at the boss of the ship, waiting for his instructions. The boat boss frowned and looked at Li Qingyuan, who appeared in front of him, constantly calculating in his heart. Is the opponent really awesome, or is the newborn calf not afraid of tigers? It's just that he doesn't move, but it doesn't mean that others don't move. The sailor came out with a grinning grin. Boy, since you ran out on your own, it will save you trouble. You will hand over all the money obediently, and then tie yourself up. Uncle, my kind heart can give you a way out. Chapter 21. Boom. The captain who was talking about it suddenly exploded into firework in front of everyone, and various splashing mosaics instantly showered several people nearby. Li Qingyuan reluctantly put down the left hand that was in front of his eyes, knowing that the amount of explosives would be smaller. It was the first time that I was so positive and I was still a man, which really made me feel a little sad. What happened? The other sailors suddenly lost their color, and they couldn't even wipe the blood on their bodies, but looked around in a panic. If this is a group of elite soldiers, now at least they have to take out their weapons and spread out to find cover. It will be like these sailors. If there are really enemies, they are basically living targets. However, considering that some of them are actually incompetent water bandits, it is natural that they cannot be demanded by the Special Forces King's quality. I really don't want to kill people. Why don't you just send us out safely? Li Qingyuan spread his hands helplessly and said indifferently. To be honest, the first time he murdered, he was sprayed by the other side, by the way. Not only did he not feel uncomfortable, but he was even a little excited. It can only be said that the original body is definitely an antisocial personality, but he has been abiding by the law for more than 30 years, and the biggest living thing he has killed since childhood is just a chicken. You? What did you do? The boss of the ship reacted first, and prepared to take the gun out of his waist in a panic. But the more hectic, the more chaotic. He couldn't even open the pistol holster around his waist. These guys who run black boats act like Yama King when they face the isolated and helpless stowaways. but in fact they are only the creatures at the bottom of the food chain. If you really have the ability, you won't be reduced to the point of running a black boat. I advise you to touch the back of your belt before pulling out your gun, but I suggest you lighten it, or it will burst immediately. Li Qingyuan reminded kindly. You. What did you do? The boss of the boat, who was about to draw his gun, immediately stopped, and by the way, the bodies of several sailors also froze. Everyone looked at each other. I looked at you, and finally saw a piece of chewing gum on each other's belt. Naturally, the people who run the black boat can't be so clean. So even if there are more dirty things on the clothes, they won't care. Besides, who has nothing to do to pay attention to the back of their belts? C4 plastic bomb, you have seen the power just now. I just need to press the switch lightly, and you will slam like him. Li Qingyuan pointed at the most unknown object lying on the ground. Said, was he really shaking hands with everyone when he got on the boat to please the relationship? Besides, in order to prevent any danger, he just took advantage of the opportunity to watch the scenery to install a lot of explosives on the boat. Even if these guys discovered chewing gum explosives in advance, he could bomb the boat to threaten them. With the blasting genius, he can definitely be regarded as a bomb expert, and he is the kind of top-level expert, the kind that is not mixed with water at all. If he is willing to stay in Sokovia, relying on this technique, he can definitely become a sweet pastry for several warlords to vie for. In other words, going to the chaotic region of South America and Africa to be a native emperor is probably more than enough. But for Li Qingyuan, who has an infinite future, that kind of salted fish life is not what he wants. What he wants is the sea of stars. Under the threat of explosives, several boatmen gave in an instant. Everyone just wanted to make some blood and tears, but didn't want to lose their lives. So in a friendly and harmonious atmosphere, Li Qingyuan put on a metal vest for all the rest, or a thicker version. After all, the chewing gum in the waistband is not very safe. What if you accidentally blow up your pants when you go to the toilet? It is better to put on metal vests for everyone, so as to be safe and secure. The boss of the ship and a few sailors all had a dead mother-in-law expression. They were just big bosses. The most commonly used high-tech is the pistol in his arms. When have you heard of any hydraulic mental turbulence explosive device? Whoever hangs a ticking bomb on his chest will have a mental breakdown. The boss of the ship didn't know how many tens of thousands of times he had scolded the sailor, but I knew that this young man looked fierce and eagle-eyed, and it was not easy for him to look at the wolf. As a result, the guy had to do it. Now it's all right. Not only was he dead without a whole body, but he was also implicated in a time bomb. The group rushed all night tremblingly. The original 4-day journey was completed in less than 3 days this time. Taking advantage of the darkness of the sky, Li Qingyuan took the Wanda brothers and sisters directly onto the country of Italy. The most famous in Italy is naturally pasta, then Italian cannon, and finally Italian mafia. As for the Italian army, forget it. We are not on the funny channel. The Italian mafia obviously needs more quality than the Sokovia gangsters who run the black boats. After receiving his $200,000 for the visa application fee, Li Qingyuan instantly moved from Sokovia's black house. He became a pure Chinese Italian, while Wanda and Pietro became his half-brothers and sisters. These are the real information that can be found in the database. The certificate processing personnel took him directly to the municipal government office to input them. It is absolutely true regardless of whoever comes to check them. After a short stay in Italy for 2 days, he bought a ticket to New York under his new identity and rushed to the United States. After all, Christmas is about to be celebrated now, and next year will be a good day for Iron Man to be born. So I must rush to read the first-hand information. Not to mention, everything depends on Iron Man to make a fortune and get rich. The target person has already set off from Rome, and the destination for the flight is New York. When Li Qingyuan took Wanda brothers and sisters on the plane, a handsome young white man hurried to the airport and reported to the instant messenger in his ears. The person who ordered us to meet each other in New York to see if we can absorb it. An old voice came from the communicator in an instant. Understood. The young man who received the order replied with a constant expression. He didn't expect that he would meet a master blaster if he came to Italy to do a simple investigation task. Running towards the idea of cutting grass, roots, and corpses, Li Qingyuan directly blasted the ship after it drove a certain distance after docking. In his opinion, no one would pay attention to the broken fishing boat that sank in the Mediterranean. It is a pity that the so-called cleverness is wronged by cleverness. If he didn't deal with the explosion, he might not have encountered such annoying things. Chapter 22 Hydra. Bossly. Business is booming and financial resources are growing. Tongshi, the same joy. New York, Manhattan, Chinatown. Today, a new antique shop opened in Chinatown. So early in the morning, firecrackers were blasted, and the dragon and lion dances were so lively. Standing at the door constantly accepting congratulations from others, Li Qingyuan felt that his smile was about to freeze. As an Italian who has moved to New York, he wants to live legally and reasonably in New York, so he must have a clear identity here. It's naturally impossible to work for someone, and it's hard to get through, so you have to be your own boss anyway. If it is said according to the general plot, he should now go to a place like Hell's Kitchen to open a general store or a small exorcism clinic, so that he can match the main line of Marvel. But after considering the half rate, he felt that such a lifestyle was definitely not suitable for him. In the ruined place of Hell's Kitchen, 2 gun battles in 3 days and various gangsters robbed the site. How hard is it for me to go to that place to ask for a living? It might as well continue to stay in Sokovia. Besides, the current Wanda is still a cute little loli, and there is no means of self-protection at all. If something happens accidentally, it is too late to regret it. So after thinking about it, he decided that it would be better to be more stable and directly abandon the 2 newcomer birthplaces, Hell's Kitchen and Queens District, instead choosing a relatively peaceful and safe area like Chinatown. Geographically speaking, Chinatown is right in the middle of Hell's Kitchen and Queens District. If there is no traffic jam, it is only 20 to 30 minutes away. If you really want to refresh the people, you can take the subway in minutes. When it's okay, it's all about fighting monsters and brushing skills. He has no plans to put his home in the strange nest. If you go out every day, you have to worry about the sudden shot of the cold gun, and the night's sleep might be sent directly to the sky by the rocket launcher. This kind of life is really impossible. As for why you want to open an antique shop in Chinatown, anyway, he is not going to make money from this shop. The main reason for opening a shop is to have a legal identity. Besides, there is an antique shop in hand, and when the time comes to deal with the antiques that he brought out of the mission world, it would be more reasonable. Wanda happily slapped her little hand next to him. It was the first time she saw a lion dance, and it was very interesting. Pietro doesn't know where he is going crazy. Anyway, he is so grown up, and he is not afraid of losing it. After enthusiastically calling roar with the neighbors around him, the bustling shop slowly became deserted. After all, antique shops can never be like a restaurant. They are basically the owners who have not opened for 3 years and eat for 3 years. What's more, all the antiques in his store are fakes just obtained from the small commodity wholesale market, and even the labels are not torn. If this is fooled by fools, it would be too ridiculous. Handed the opening red envelope to the foreman of the lion dance team and checked that it was almost 12 o'clock. Li Qingyuan thought about closing the door and took Wanda to eat hot pot. As for Pietro, when the meal arrives, the kid will definitely appear immediately. Don't worry about him at all. Only when he was about to close the door, he saw a customer appeared in the store. The other party is holding the bottom of the bowl with the coxcomb cup printed during the Ming Dynasty Chenghua period, as if the thing is really an antique that has been passed down for hundreds of years, rather than the one he bought from the vegetable market yesterday. Are the guests here to buy things? Slightly raised his head and looked at the young white man standing in his shop, Li Qingyuan asked depressedly. He was supposed to be 1.8 meters tall, and he was considered very good among Chinese, but the guy in front of him was actually half a head taller than himself, which really made people feel the deep malice from the world. And this kid is handsome, even from his man's eyes. The other person's looks can definitely be regarded as handsome and tall, and overall he is slightly worse than himself by a point or two. If I want to buy it, I should also buy that painting. The young man put down the fake coxcomb cup in his hand and pointed to the Picasso painting hanging on the side wall. Originally, Li Qingyuan was going to send this painting directly to the auction house to sell, but considering the source is not very easy to explain and there are still a lot of deposits on hand, so he put this matter behind his head and prepared. I'll talk about it for a while. Because Picasso's work was really not understood at all except those brick houses, he hung it directly on the wall. Anyway, so many people wandered around in his shop in the morning, and no one found the painting. It's still true. But the guy in front of him found out the most valuable thing in his shop at a glance. Not to mention, his vision alone is very powerful. More importantly, why does he always feel that the other party looks familiar? While Li Qingyuan is looking at the opponent is constantly looking at him. Grant Ward, SHIELD Level 5 Senior Agent, Stealth Operation Expert, a combat skill, even within the entire SHIELD can be ranked in the top 30. Don't look at the top 30 as if it were just a title, but in fact, in terms of the probability that SHIELD agents can spread all over the world, Grant Ward can definitely be regarded as the world's top soldier. In fact, he once completed many tasks that seemed unthinkable to others. For example, he just flew back from Eastern Europe. The last task was to assassinate the consul of a small country. It stands to reason that he and Li Qingyuan would not meet so quickly, but who asked Ward to complete the task when he drove his motorboat diagonally across the Mediterranean Sea and encountered an explosion. The entire ferry boat suddenly disintegrated in front of his eyes, and the employees on the boat turned directly into dust in the Mediterranean without any reaction time, which made Agent Ward's heart chill. Fortunately, I was a little slower, or else I was injured directly by mistake. Generally speaking, activists like him will have an instinctive protective response before encountering danger, which is the legendary sixth sense. No one can tell exactly what it was, but Ward knew that if that feeling hadn't been triggered, he would have died for a long time. But this time, my sixth sense didn't even have time to warn him. It can be seen that the skills of the person who set up the explosives has reached the point of perfection. Such masters, even within SHIELD, are estimated to be very few. So Grant Ward immediately reported like his immediate boss, John Garrett, and found the location of Li Qingyuan along the way. Chapter 23. Frowning and looking at the guy in front of him who was slightly taller and slightly ugly than himself, Li Qingyuan began to search his memory and his mind. Since it looks familiar, it should be a character with a name and a surname in Marvel, but why doesn't he have any impression? Seeing the mission goal in front of him fell into contemplation, Grant Ward felt that it was definitely a mistake for the foster father to send himself. He is not the type who is good at persuading people with reason. He is more good at using his fists than using words to impress others. Generally speaking, this kind of matter should be discussed by Phil Coulson, the mayor of Shinran Village, or if it is really not possible, it should also be discussed by SHIELD, the excellent employee of HYDRA, to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sitwell Agent. But John Garrett, Ward's foster father and immediate boss, didn't think so at all. Unlike those Hydra bosses who broke into SHIELD early in the morning, John Garrett was an upright and decent SHIELD at first. Although he was a little selfish, he still followed the footsteps of justice in the general direction. It was only later that he had to retreat to the second line because of serious injuries, and then it happened that a certain black leader actually obliterated the credit of the old comrade, which made Garrett dissatisfied. Don't guess, it's the black bald head. At that time, Garrett could retire as an old man. As a result, because of the hierarchical system used by the black bald head, a veteran who could be called a legend was turned into an 8th level agent. You are only at level 8, and your whole family is at level 8. Regarding this definition, Garrett feels that his life and personality have been insulted. At any rate, he also made great contributions to the birth and death of S.H.I.E.L.D. The 10th level is the privilege of the director. He can understand, but giving him an 8th level is what is going on. Perhaps for others, the 8th level agent is already in existence that people look up to. The entire SHIELD has hundreds of thousands of people, and only a few dozen individuals have obtained this privilege, which can definitely be regarded as a privilege. But for Garrett, he was dissatisfied. Lao Tzu is an old man who has been playing around since Director Carter's time. When Lao Tzu and Director Carter were performing tasks, the black marinated egg didn't know that he was playing in the mud on that street corner. What's more, that black braised egg was nepotism, and actually promoted a chick who was only in her 20s and had been in SHIELD for less than 5 years to a level 9 agent, which made Garrett even more depressed. Lao Tzu's desperate life is still not as good as the 2 long legs of others. This Nima is an amazing shady. So Garrett turned directly, anyway, with the contacts he has accumulated over the past few decades, he can stand on his own hills wherever he goes, and there is no need to hang himself on a tree. It's just because Garrett is the Hydra that just came into effect in order to get rid of the chaos anyway. The only people who can use it now are 2 or 3 kittens, which makes him urgently short of talents. So Li Qingyuan, a bomb master, instantly appeared in his sight. As the big boss behind the scenes, Garrett himself definitely cannot come forward directly, and he can't believe other people. So even if he knows that his son is not the best person to be a lobbyist, he can only be a dead horse. Healed. Grant Ward, FBI agent, there are some things I want to find out about you. Ward thought for a long time and didn't know how he should be close to Li Qingyuan, so he raised his vest to prove. Anyway, he took FBI certificates when he went out. It really didn't work. There were several layers of vests such as CIA and ML6, and there was always one layer suitable for each other. Hearing the other party's self-report of his family, Li Qingyuan just remembered. Where did he see each other? SHIELD agent. This is a Marvel TV work launched by Disney after seeing the hot sale of Marvel movies. Because the major superhero were too paid to participate in the performance, so they could only use the new actor, Mr. Grant Ward, but played a very important role in it. It was only because it seemed that the year of the SHIELD agent was after Chitauri attacked New York, which is 6 or 7 years away from the original plot. So he suddenly saw this much younger ward agent, and he didn't think of it for a while. No way. Who remembers the looks of such an ugly man? If you change a beauty, he will definitely remember it. In other words, since Grant Ward can appear, doesn't it mean that Vibe Girl Sky will also appear? I still remember that the little girl should still be fostered as a stray child. Do I have a chance to cut her off? Anyway, raising a Crimson is also raising, and raising a Vibe Girl shouldn't be a big deal, right? FBI? Only a few days after I arrived in the United States, what can I do? Lee Qingyuan directly told Wanda to go upstairs first because he knew the identity of the other party, and then asked slightly suspiciously, "We understand that your true identity does not match your ID at all." Ward looked into the other's eyes, and for a moment, he seemed to read the feeling of relief in the other's eyes. This makes Agent Ward very puzzled. Even if the other party is a bomb expert, this is the other party's base camp. So the other party is confident, but who can tell him? What is the feeling of relief for the other party? How can I feel that the other party has seen myself through? I escaped from Sokovia. The Italian ID is just to deal with customs. Since I know that the other party is a member of the SHIELD branch of the Hydra underground organization wearing an FBI vest, it is natural not to forge my ID. It may be hidden from the other party. The HYDRA SHIELD branch is not a vain name. Thanks to the tireless efforts of Nick Fury and the embezzlement of public funds, this organization has grown and grown into the world's leading behemoth. His life experience is completely transparent in front of the other party. Coming to the Marvel world, it is impossible not to deal with SHIELD, but he never expected that the other party would come so fast. According to his plan, at least he would not meet the village head of the new village until he had brushed 3 worlds. Very well, get to know again. The National Land Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Bureau, Grant Ward, I think with your skill, I should have heard of us. Ward stretched out his hand and said to Lee Qingyuan, SHIELD is naturally a ghost unit for ordinary people. Many people have never heard of this name, but in Ward's view, the young man in front of him should know it. After all, the opponent's skill in explosives with one hand is definitely a good player who wanders in the dark world all year round. He has definitely heard of the name SHIELD. Chapter 24. The host came into contact with the node character Grant Ward and started the second teleportation qualification. The moment Lee Qingyuan shook hands with Ward, the prompt sound of the system without any emotion appeared in his mind. My Nima. Ward saw that the face of the young man on the opposite side instantly changed from red to white, and then from white to green. He immediately felt that the other person would change his face with the legendary magic skills. But now Lee Qingyuan has no time or energy to talk to Ward, and the system has begun to transmit directly. It is detected that the host is preparing to carry living creatures for teleportation. Do you consume a boundary teleportation role? Still have this operation? In the last plot world, he did consider bringing someone to try and see if he could bring it together when he came back, but considering his limited strength at the time, it would be difficult to deal with if it really changed alive, so he had to give up. Anyway, according to his plan, he is going to visit Hell's Kitchen or Queens in a few days, and try to see if he can meet those weak street heroes, such as Daredevil posing as a blind man, or he has not yet become a purple man. Jessica Jones who can't afford it. But who knows that this guy in front of him is actually qualified to start the world? Isn't this B********* D Tamade a villain? Okay, sure. It's just that there is no time for him to think so much right now. God knows what kind of world is being transmitted this time. So bring more personal insurance. What's more, even though the guy in front of him is AB*****************, D, his skill is definitely just now. Even the weak superhero, it is estimated that he may not be able to beat the opponent. The host did not break the transfer volume, and the transfer failed. As the dizziness came again, Lee Qingyuan couldn't help but began to curse. You said that you made such a show. Are you planning to play with people or something? But even if he scolded the entire Sanzijing, the system did not respond. As the dizziness slowly disappeared, Lee Qingyuan also knew that cursing a mechanical life form would have no effect at all, except making himself irritable. He could only start to look at the surrounding environment angrily. Now, it seems to be in a large supermarket. There are rows of shelves on both sides, which are full of various goods, and many people around me are shopping for goods. Because time is still, everyone's actions seem very ridiculous. It's just that Lee Qingyuan looked carefully for a long time, and couldn't help but wonder if he didn't see anyone he was familiar with. What exactly is this scene? I don't have any impression of myself at all. Fortunately, The main mission immediately solved the confusion in his heart. Main mission: survive. The mist from another dimension covers the town, and endless monsters in the mist are about to start massacring the residents of the town. Please survive in this dangerous town. Mission objective: you can complete the mission by surviving for 7 days, and there is no reward for the mission. Side goal: for every 10 more town residents surviving after 7 days, you will get an extra point of free attribute points, such as John Raymond and Son, Ms. Amanda, Mrs. Commody, Cashier Sari, Principal Ripla, and Supermarket Manager for Ollie, Lawyer Norton, and Mrs. Marjorie survive. Each will be rewarded with a little freedom attribute point. After seeing this main quest, he was still a little puzzled, and immediately wanted to understand what world he had traveled into. The Mist. The plot of the movie is that a scenic American inland town is suddenly shrouded in mist one day. The protagonist David Raymond and his son Billy Raymond are trapped in the town together with other plot characters, the only one inside a large supermarket. There are endless monsters in the fog. These are terrifying creatures from other dimensions. They have incredible sizes and dangers. By the way, the trapped people in the supermarket were actually bewitched by a goddess, because this disaster was brought down by God. Punish. In the end, the protagonist and the group were about to rush out to find a way to survive. After 9 deaths, they finally rushed into the car with their son and 3 other people and drove out of the town. Originally, this was an ordinary Hollywood drama, but the damn director finally made a joke to the protagonist. When the protagonist's car ran out of gas, countless monsters roared in the fog, so in order to make people around him walk peacefully, the protagonist killed his son and 3 other followers with only 4 bullets left. Then he rushed out of the car, preparing for the unknown horror. The results of it. The director played with him fiercely. The fog gradually dissipated at this time, and the military was sending people to restore order. The roar of the monsters just now was the scream of being killed by the military. In this way, the protagonist's personal heroism not only can't be saved by one person, but also killed his own son by himself, which can be described as a completely tragic story. Because it is a low-cost movie, there are no big-name stars in the whole movie, and there are no special effects. The so-called fog monsters are basically looming. The basic plot is about the sinister heart. You can think of it as it is a monster movie, but it can also be regarded as a humanistic movie. However, since ancient times, the reviews have been more exciting than the main film. So after the analysis of a group of sand sculpture netizens in the sky, this originally not good movie suddenly became a masterpiece of the so-called Cthulhu recovery flow, one by one sand sculpture netizens. It is true that various analyses of the film are made, and it is justified and well-founded that people want to scold the mother. 7 days? 4 days longer than the original movie plot. After reading the task description, Lee Ching-yuen couldn't help thinking. I still remember that in the original plot, the army began to counterattack on the 3rd day of the fog and don't retake the town. But now the mission description is actually 7 days. It can be seen that the dam system has secretly increased the difficulty. However, it can be seen from the fact that the task reward is 0. If he only wants to go through the task safely, then he should be able to win it. It's just that he is not a tourist here. You must know that Hydra has already set his sights on himself. Although he does not reject Hydra, it is based on his own advantage, or at least equal cooperation. He doesn't want to be drunk by such a bunch of crazy roar. So this task really needs to be pondered. After all, if it is done well, based on the current population of the supermarket and the 9 target people, you can get 30 free attributes without saying a word. With a free attribute at 30, it is estimated that I will be able to go to Captain America immediately. Definitely, wanting to get so many attributes is nothing but a dream. No one is dead. Is that a joke? Set a small goal first. For example, make it 10 points? Chapter 25. Ula Ula Ula. The ear-piercing air defense alarm was sounded instantly, and then everyone in the supermarket stopped their movements and moved in front of the glass curtain wall of the supermarket. The supermarket in the small town is surrounded by walls on 3 sides, but the front is all made of glass panels. Because there are basically no vicious cases in such a small place, the builders will naturally not spend more money to build another layer of protection. Anyway, strengthening glass is enough for ordinary people. There are monsters. They took old John away. An old man with blood on his chest ran over from the square, followed by heavy fog. Everyone in the supermarket immediately began to panic. Several people helped the old man into the door, and then began to try to stabilize his emotions. Some people quickly rushed out of the supermarket, ready to find their car or rush back to their home. However, those mists are obviously much faster than human movements, and it can be said that the entire outside world has been enveloped before most people can react. Then everyone heard a heart-piercing scream from the outside world. The people staying in the supermarket were panicked instantly. The communication signal was completely interrupted because of the storm last night. Now even the field of vision is blocked by the heavy fog. In addition to the screams coming from time to time, everyone's heart is immediately lost. Grabbed it. Then the ground shook suddenly, and the goods on the shelves and the chandeliers on the top of the supermarket crashed and fell. After a full minute, the shaking on the ground stopped, and the people remaining in the supermarket began to stand up and look at each other one after another, wondering what happened. It should be an earthquake, and the smoke outside should have been caused by a chemical plant accident. Before everyone knew what had happened, Norton, a black lawyer, immediately began to explain to everyone with his wealth of professional knowledge. Definitely, it may also be that he urgently needs a thought he can understand to comfort him. After all, whether it is the fog or the earthquake just now, it came too suddenly and made him feel that he, who has always regarded himself as an elite, felt it. Crisis. Norton is an elite lawyer working in New York. He will come to the small town of Walia for vacation only during holidays. From a vacation point of view, the small town of Walia is quite good. It has beautiful mountains and waters. By the way, with its low reputation and no crowds, it is definitely a good place for retirement. Only now, Norton really regrets it. Why did I want to come to this remote and ruined place to buy a villa? A sudden natural disaster caused the broken town to completely lose contact with the outside world. Now he can only hide in the supermarket with a group of country folks. Norton feels extremely depressed. You, who can help me and send me home? At this moment, a woman with a flat head and a bald head suddenly cried and asked at the crowd at the door. Her home is on the other side of the square, less than 100 meters away from the supermarket, and it takes only 2 minutes to get home on weekdays. But now the fog and confusion outside, not to mention the various screams from the outside just now, are even more daunting. Please, please, please help me. I have 2 children in my family. The eldest, Wanda, is only 8 years old. They must be terrified by now. The flat-headed woman continued to cry for help, but inside the supermarket everyone in can only persuade her to stay calm and not to rush out to die. Li Qingyuan looked at the plot a little bit confusingly. He almost forgot the story of the fog. After all, this movie is not so much a monster movie as it is a movie that analyzes people's hearts. When he watched it back then, the whole process was accelerated. Look, so I don't know much about these dog blood plots. In other words, there are many murderous opportunities outside. Who would really risk her life to help this woman for a few words? Who does she think she is? 1 has no money, 2 has no power, and 3 has no looks, and is a mother of 2 children. Even a male compatriot who has ideas will have no ideas. Not to mention that because it was produced at a low cost, there were no beautiful girls in the whole movie, which made people embarrassed. There was still Ruth in the story world last time. God will curse you. Seeing that all the men were indifferent, the flat-headed woman knew that she couldn't count on their help, and she was cruel and prepared to push the door by herself. I have to say that after a woman becomes a mother, she is hundreds of times stronger than before in terms of willpower and determination. Mrs. Marjorie, don't do it. Others still admonished her, wanting her to give up the act of going out to die. After all, so many people just rushed out without any news. No one knows whether the mist is poisonous or not. If it rushes out, it will be a real life of 9 deaths. Wait a minute. Li Qingyuan, who was going to watch the whole show, was stunned for an instant when he heard other people calling the flat-headed woman roar, and hurriedly shouted, "This woman is actually the so-called Mrs. Marjorie? One of your mission goals? You? Are you willing to help me?" The flat-headed woman who was shouted had hope in her eyes, but when she looked back and saw that the voice was actually a Chinese, her face instantly lost color. As a native of the small town, Mrs. Marjorie knows almost everyone in the town, so she just hoped that her old neighbors could help her with the affection of the past. On the other hand, Li Qingyuan's appearance knew that she was a foreigner who came to travel. In such a situation where local people were unwilling to help, it was naturally even more impossible for a foreigner to help her. Definitely yes, but please wait 2 minutes. Li Qingyuan immediately began to pick up things from the supermarket shelves. He has indeed prepared a lot of explosives to carry with him these days, but they are all treasures at the bottom of the box, and they can't be wasted if they can't start the game. Anyway, there are a lot of raw materials in this large supermarket, and it takes less than 2 minutes to make some simple incendiary bombs on site. By the way, in order to improve his survival ability, he also used the 3 free attribute points that he had originally saved up to use. There are several kinds of monsters in the movie The Mist, the most garbage of which is naturally the poisonous scorpion flying insect and the skeleton bird that makes a living by catching the poisonous scorpion flying insect. The strength of these two creatures is trash to death. Ordinary people can shoot flying insects to death with a mop, and a few people can knock the skeleton bird to death. Then the more powerful one is the parasitic spider. The silk spit out is strongly corrosive. It likes to grab people and lay eggs in the human body, which is a bit like a weakened version of the alien. It's just that the aliens give birth to one at a time, and the parasitic spiders give birth to 1 litter at a time, 1 litter of thousands. At best, these three kinds of garbage can only be regarded as ants among monsters. They mainly rely on quantity and their own toxins to win. Really fight. Normal people can at least 5 kills when they understand the fighting method and overcome the fear in their hearts. Definitely, this is impossible. When facing this unknown creature, human beings will unconsciously have a sense of fear in their hearts. So once they really face it, they will basically become food for monsters. Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card or directly on my channel. If you'd like to support future content, consider joining me on Patreon. Your support means a lot. The link is in the description. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to drop a comment